I gave my son the gift of life on a Tuesday morning. By Friday afternoon, he had decided my life was no longer worth living under his roof. I was lying in a hospital bed, my side stitched up with 20 staples, my body missing an organ, and my heart about to be ripped out of my chest. I donated a kidney to save my only child, Darnell. 3 days later, his wife handed me a trash bag with my old clothes and sent me to a nursing home. But just a few minutes after they kicked me out into the freezing Chicago winter, the doctor ran out looking panicked. What she told me next made me freeze on the spot and changed everything. Before I tell you how I took back what was mine and taught them a lesson they will never forget, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Hit like and subscribe if you have ever sacrificed everything for family only to be paid back in betrayal. I am Otis King, 72 years old. For 40 years, I worked concrete and steel in this city. I built skyscrapers, I laid foundations, and I never asked a man for a dollar I did not earn. But lying in that recovery room at Northwestern Memorial Hospital, I felt weaker than I ever had in my life. The anesthesia was still heavy in my blood, making the room spin in slow, nauseating circles. The beep of the heart monitor was the only rhythm I had. My left side, where they had taken the kidney, felt like it was on fire, a dull, throbbing heat that radiated down to my hip. I tried to shift my weight, and a sharp gasp escaped my dry lips. Water. I needed water. I looked to my right. There was a curtain separating me from the other bed. Darnell was over there. My son. My boy. He had been on dialysis for 2 years. 2 years of watching him fade away, his skin turning gray, his energy gone. When the doctor said I was a match, I did not hesitate. Not for a second. He is my blood. You do not count the cost when it comes to your children. You just pay it. Darnell! I rasped out, my voice sounding like gravel grinding together. You awake, son? There was silence behind the curtain, just the hiss of an oxygen machine. Darnell, I tried again, louder this time, fighting the pain in my ribs. Then I heard the click of heels on the linoleum floor. Fast, sharp, aggressive. The curtain was ripped back, but it was not a nurse. It was Tiffany, my daughter-in-law. She stood at the foot of my bed looking pristine in a white wool coat that probably cost more than my truck. Her blonde hair was pulled back tight, pulling her face into a permanent sneer. She did not look at the monitors. She did not ask how I was feeling. She did not offer me the water that was sitting right there on the tray. She dropped a black plastic garbage bag onto my legs. It landed with a soft thud right on top of my incision. I flinched, biting back a scream. "What is this?" I asked, my hand trembling as I reached for the bag. "It is your things, Otis," she said. Her voice was calm, terrifyingly calm, like she was discussing a contract for a duplex, not the life of a human being. "We packed up your room this morning." Packed my room. I repeated the words, not making sense. "I am not dead, Tiffany. I am going home in a few days." "No," she said, shaking her head slowly as if explaining simple math to a toddler. "You are not coming back to the house, Otis. Darnell is going to need a sterile environment to recover. He needs peace and quiet. We cannot have an old man coughing and shuffling around. It is too much risk for infection." I stared at her. The house she was talking about was my house. I bought the land in 1970. I poured the foundation myself. I framed the walls. I laid the roof. When my wife Lucille died, I let Darnell and Tiffany move in because they said they were saving for a down payment. That was 5 years ago. "That is my house, Tiffany," I said, pushing myself up on my elbows. The pain shot through me like a lightning bolt, but my anger was hotter. "I let you stay there. You do not tell me where I can go." Tiffany smiled. It was a cold, practiced smile. She reached into her designer purse and pulled out a folded document. She tossed it onto the bed next to the garbage bag. "Actually, it is Darnell's house now," she said. "And since Darnell and I are married, it is our house. You signed the quitclaim deed on Monday morning, Otis. Remember, right before the surgery prep?" My mind raced back to Monday. The chaos, the nurses prepping me, Tiffany shoving a stack of papers in my face. "It is just the liability forms, Otis," she had said. "Just standard hospital procedure. Just sign here, here, and here so we can get Darnell into surgery." I was scared for my son. I was not wearing my reading glasses. I trusted her. "You tricked me," I whispered. The realization hit me harder than the surgery. You slipped a deed transfer into the medical forms. I facilitated a necessary transition of assets, she corrected, checking her watch. Look, the transport van from Shady Pines nursing home is downstairs. They have a bed waiting for you. It is fully paid for the first month. After that, well, you have your pension, right? I looked past her at the curtain where Darnell was lying. Darnell, I roared. It took every ounce of strength I had. Darnell, are you listening to this? She is stealing my house. She is throwing me out. The silence stretched. I knew he was awake. I could hear him shifting in the bed. I could hear his breath hitching. Darnell, look at me. I gave you my kidney, boy. I gave you a piece of my body. Finally, a voice came from behind the curtain. It was weak, shaky, and pathetic. Pop, please, Darnell mumbled. Just do what she says. I can't deal with the stress right now. My blood pressure, Pop. You know I can't have stress. I fell back onto the pillows. The physical pain was gone, replaced by a numbness that spread from my chest to my toes. My son, the boy I taught to fish, the boy I sat up with when he had fevers, the man I just cut myself open to save. He was selling me out for a quiet life. He was letting this woman erase me. The door opened and a tall, burly orderly came in with a wheelchair. Time to go, Mr. King, the orderly said, looking at a clipboard. Discharge papers are all signed. I am not discharged, I said, my voice breaking. I just had major surgery 3 days ago. I still have a drain in my side. Dr. Stevens signed off on it, Tiffany said quickly. She turned to the orderly. Get him in the chair. The van charges for waiting time. The orderly hesitated, looking at my chart, then at Tiffany, then at me. He saw the tension. He saw the tears I was fighting back. But he had a job to do. He moved to the side of the bed. Come on, Mr. King. Let's take it slow, he said gently. I wanted to fight. I wanted to swing at them. But my body was broken. I swung my legs over the edge of the bed. The room tilted. The floor felt like ice under my bare feet. I reached for the garbage bag. My hands were shaking so bad I could barely grip the plastic. Inside were my work boots, my flannel shirt, and my jeans. That was it. 40 years of building a legacy reduced to a plastic sack. I stood up, swaying. Tiffany took a step back like I was a disease. You are evil, I said to her. I did not yell. I just said it. You have rot inside you, girl, and it is going to eat you alive. She rolled her eyes. Save the sermon for the nursing home, Otis. Goodbye. She turned her back on me and walked over to Darnell's bed, opening the curtain just enough to slip inside and whisper to him. I saw his hand reach out and take hers. That was the dagger. That was the end. I sat in the wheelchair. The orderly pushed me out into the hallway. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead. Nurses walked by, busy with their charts, not noticing the old man being wheeled out to his doom. We went down the elevator in silence. The doors opened to the lobby, and the blast of cold air hit me before we even got to the sliding doors. It was January in Chicago. The hawk was out. That is what we call the wind here. It cuts through you like a knife. I was wearing thin hospital sweatpants and a paper-thin jacket I had pulled from the bag. The orderly pushed me to the curb where a rusty white van with the words Shady Pines painted on the side was idling. The driver, a young kid who looked like he would rather be anywhere else, hopped out and opened the side door. Careful with the step, the orderly said. I stood up. The wind whipped my hospital gown around my legs. The cold seeped instantly into my incision, making the staples ache. I looked back at the massive hospital building. Somewhere on the 4th floor, my son was lying in a warm bed with my kidney working inside him, holding the hand of the woman who had just robbed me. I climbed into the van. The seats were vinyl and cold. It smelled of stale urine and bleach. I sat by the window and watched the automatic doors of the hospital close. I felt like a fool. A used-up, discarded fool. I closed my eyes, letting the vibration of the engine rattle my bones. I was homeless. I was injured. I was alone. But then I saw running. Through the glass of the hospital doors, a figure in a white coat was sprinting. Not walking. Sprinting. It was a woman. Her coat was flying behind her. She pushed through the doors, scanning the line of cars frantically. It was Dr. Alana Hart, my surgeon. She spotted the van. She waved her arms, yelling something I could not hear over the engine. She ran right into the street, ignoring a taxi that honked at her. "Wait!" she screamed. "Stop the van!" The driver slammed on the brakes just as he was about to pull away. I jerked forward, grabbing my side in pain. Dr. Hart ripped the side door open. Her chest was heaving, her face was pale, her eyes wide with a kind of fear I had never seen on a doctor before. She looked at me, then she climbed up into the van, grabbing my hand. Her hands were trembling. "Mr. King, thank God," she gasped, trying to catch her breath. "You have to come back inside. Now!" I shook my head. "I can't, Doc. They discharged me. My son, he kicked me out." "No," she said, her voice dropping to a terrified whisper. "You don't understand. I just got the pathology report back from the lab, the tissue samples from your kidney, and the blood work from Darnell." She looked over her shoulder as if she was afraid someone was listening. "Mr. King, you didn't just have kidney failure. And Darnell, he isn't just sick. There is something in your blood. Both of you." She squeezed my hand so hard it hurt. "It is arsenic, Otis. You are being poisoned, and the levels in your blood, they are high enough to kill a horse. But what I found in Darnell's chart, what he knew before the surgery," she stopped, tears welling in her eyes. "He knew, Otis. He knew everything. And if you leave this hospital, you are going to be dead in 48 hours. The cold wind blew into the van, but I didn't feel it anymore. All I felt was the fire in my veins turning into ice. I looked at the doctor, then back at the hospital tower. Arsenic. Poison. They did not just want my house. They wanted me dead. I looked at Dr. Hart. "Get me out of this van," I said. And that was the moment Otis King, the victim, died. And Otis King, the nightmare, began. The bench at the bus stop was made of cold metal mesh, the kind designed to be uncomfortable so nobody would sleep on it. I was sitting there shivering uncontrollably with a plastic trash bag on my lap and a fresh surgical wound throbbing in my side like a second heartbeat. The Chicago wind, the one we call the Hawk, was screaming off Lake Michigan, cutting right through the thin cotton of my hospital sweatpants. I wrapped my arms around myself, trying to hold my stitches together, trying to keep my insides from spilling out onto the dirty pavement. People drove by in their warm cars, looking away. Nobody wants to make eye contact with an old black man sitting alone in the freezing cold with a garbage bag. They probably thought I was a junkie or just another homeless soul lost to the streets. In a way, they were right. I was homeless now. My son had seen to that. I closed my eyes, feeling the tears freeze on my cheeks before they could even roll down. The pain in my back where my kidney used to be was a dull, grinding agony, but it was nothing compared to the hole in my chest where my heart had been broken. I kept hearing Tiffany's voice. "It's Darnell's house now." I kept seeing Darnell's hand reaching out to hold hers behind that curtain. I had built that life for them. I had worked double shifts pouring concrete until my fingers were permanently curled just so Darnell would never have to touch a shovel. And this was my retirement package, a one-way ticket to a nursing home and a bag of old clothes. I was just about to stand up to try and flag down a taxi with the last $20 I had tucked in my sock when I heard the screech of tires. It wasn't a normal stop. It was the sound of rubber burning against asphalt. A silver sedan swerved into the bus lane, hopping the curb and coming to a halt just inches from my knees. The passenger door flew open before the car even stopped rocking. "Mr. King, get in now." I squinted against the wind. It was Dr. Alana Hart, my surgeon, the woman who had cut me open 3 days ago. She wasn't wearing her white coat anymore. She was in a heavy wool trench coat, her hair wild and windblown, her eyes wide with a terror that didn't belong on a doctor's face. I didn't move. I couldn't. My brain was slow frozen by the cold and the shock. "Dr. Hart," I mumbled, my teeth chattering. I don't have insurance anymore. They canceled it." "Otis, please," she screamed, leaning across the seat. "This isn't about insurance. You are in danger. Get in the car before you freeze to death or before they realize I'm gone." There was something in her voice, a desperation that cut through the fog in my head. I grabbed the doorframe, groaning as I pulled my battered body into the passenger seat. The heat in the car blasted against my frozen skin, stinging like 1,000 needles. She hit the lock button immediately, her hands shaking so hard she had to try twice. She didn't drive away, though. She just gripped the steering wheel, staring at me, her chest heaving. I looked at her. She was young, maybe 35, brilliant, and usually so composed. But now she looked like she had seen a ghost. "What is it, Doc?" I asked, rubbing my side. "Did you leave a sponge inside me?" She laughed, but it was a dry, hysterical sound. "I wish it was that simple, Mr. King. God, I wish it was just a mistake." She reached into the back seat and pulled out a thick manila envelope. She held it for a second, looking at it like it was a bomb before handing it to me. "I ran the pathology report myself," she whispered. "I didn't trust the lab techs with it, not after what I saw in Darnell's pre-op charts." Otis listened to me very carefully. "The kidney we removed from you, the tissue was degrading, not from age, not from disease." I opened the envelope. I didn't understand the medical jargon, the numbers and the charts. I looked up at her, waiting. "It's arsenic, Otis." The word hung in the warm air of the car, heavy and suffocating. "Arsenic," I repeated, frowning. "Like rat poison?" "Chronic arsenic poisoning," she corrected, her voice trembling. "It has been accumulating in your system for at least 6 months. It settles in the hair, the nails, and the kidneys. That's why you've been feeling so tired lately. That's why you had those dizzy spells you told me about during the consultation. It wasn't old age, Otis. Someone has been feeding you poison. Small doses. Just enough to weaken you. Just enough to make you confused and lethargic." My mind flashed back to the Sunday dinners, Tiffany insisting on making me her special herbal tea. "It's good for your joints, Dad," she would say with that saccharine smile. "Drink it all up." I drank it. Every drop. I thanked her for it. "They poisoned me," I whispered, the realization making me nauseous. "To kill me." "No," Dr. Hart said, and this part seemed to hurt her even more to say. "If they wanted to kill you, they would have given you a large dose. They kept you alive, Otis. They kept you just healthy enough to survive the surgery. And that's the worst part." She flipped the page in the file to a chart with Darnell's name on it. Darnell knew, she said. I felt the blood drain from my face. "No, not Darnell. He's my son. He's weak, but he's not." "Look at the HLA markers," she pointed to a row of red numbers. "Darnell's blood work showed a high level of antibodies against your tissue type. He knew he wasn't a perfect match. We usually advise against transplant in these cases because the rejection risk is massive. But he overrode the protocol. He insisted on the surgery immediately. He claimed it was his only chance." I stared at the paper, the numbers blurring into red streaks. "Why?" I asked, my voice barely a croak. "Why would he take a kidney that might fail? Because he needed the sympathy," Dr. Hart said quietly. "And he needed you weak. Think about it, Otis. If you were strong, if your mind was clear, would you have signed that house over? Would you have let them take control of your accounts? They needed you on that operating table. They needed you medicated, vulnerable, and desperate to save your dying son. They used his illness and your love as a weapon. And the poison was just the insurance policy to make sure you didn't have the strength to fight back afterward." I leaned my head back against the headrest. The physical pain in my side was gone, replaced by a cold, hard fury that started in my gut and spread through my veins. They didn't just want my property. They didn't just want my money. They cannibalized me. They ate me alive piece by piece. My son let his wife poison his own father, then cut me open to steal an organ he knew might not even work, just to put me in a wheelchair and roll me into a grave. I looked at my hands. They were calloused, scarred from decades of pulling wire and laying brick. These hands had held Darnell when he was a baby. These hands had built the roof over his head, and now these hands were shaking with a rage so pure it felt like fire. "We have to go back," Dr. Hart said, reaching for the gear shift. "I'm taking you to the police. We have the evidence. We can get a blood sample from you right now to prove the arsenic levels. We can arrest them tonight." "No!" I grabbed her wrist. My grip was surprisingly strong. She looked at me, startled. "No police," I said. "Not yet. But Otis, you're sick. You need treatment. You need chelation therapy to get the heavy metals out of your blood. If you go out there alone, if I go to the police now, Tiffany will spin it." I interrupted, my voice steady for the first time. "She's a manipulator. She'll say I'm senile, that I'm making it up. She has power of attorney over me, remember? She'll say I poisoned myself to frame them. She'll have expensive lawyers paid for with my money. And Darnell, he'll lie for her. He always does." I looked out the window at the gray Chicago sky. "Besides," I said, darker now, "prison is too good for them. They tried to turn me into a vegetable. They tried to strip me of my dignity. If I go to the cops, they just go to a cell. I want them to feel what I'm feeling. I want them to be cold. I want them to be homeless. I want them to know what it's like to have the person you trust most in the world rip the ground out from under you." "Otis, you can't be serious," Dr. Hart pleaded. "You're 72 years old. You have no money, no home, and you're recovering from major surgery. Where will you go?" I reached into my pocket and pulled out a small, tarnished brass key. I had kept it hidden in the lining of my work boots for 20 years. Tiffany didn't find it because she wouldn't touch my dirty boots. "I have places," I said, "places that aren't on any deed Tiffany has seen. But I need you to do something for me, Doc." Anything she said, and I knew she meant it. "Report me missing," I said. "Tell them I ran away from the bus stop. Tell them I was delirious. But do not file that pathology report yet. Hide it. Keep the samples safe. Let them think they won. Let them think the old man is dying in a gutter somewhere." "But why?" "Because when you hunt rats, Doc, you don't make noise," I said, opening the car door. "You wait until they come out to eat the cheese. And believe me, they are going to eat." I stepped out of the car. The wind hit me again, but this time I welcomed it. It wasn't just cold air anymore. It was fuel. I wasn't just a discarded father. I was a man with a second chance, and I had work to do. I watched Dr. Hart drive away, wiping tears from her face. Then I turned up my collar, gripped my side, and started walking toward the south side. I had $0 in my pocket, but I had $1 million worth of hate in my heart. And in Chicago, that's enough to start a war. The taxi driver looked at me in the rearview mirror with eyes full of suspicion. I did not blame him. I was an old black man in a hospital gown tucked into dirty work pants, shivering in the back seat, asking to be taken to one of the roughest corners of the south side of Chicago. To him, I looked like a junkie looking for a fix, or a homeless man looking for a bridge to sleep under. He did not know that the man sitting in his cab had built half the foundations this city stands on. He did not know that the $20 bill I had handed him was the last piece of currency I had in the world, or so my daughter-in-law thought. My side was throbbing with a dull, rhythmic ache, a constant reminder of the kidney I had left behind in a son who did not want me. Every bump in the road sent a jolt of fire through my stitches, but I did not wince. Physical pain was easy. I had lived with physical pain for 40 years. Broken fingers, slipped discs, concrete burns. That was the price of labor. But the pain in my chest, the betrayal, that was something new. That was a cold, sharp blade that kept twisting. Just as we crossed over 47th Street, my phone buzzed. It was an unknown number. I knew who it was before I even answered. "Hello, Tiffany," I said, staring out the window at the gray, boarded-up storefronts passing by. "Oh, good. You are still alive," her voice chirped, sickeningly sweet, like rotten fruit. "I just wanted to let you know that I have formally taken over your financial conservatorship, Otis. Darnell and I were worried you might spend your pension on inappropriate things given your mental state. So I have frozen your accounts, just for your own protection, of course." I tightened my grip on the phone until the plastic creaked. "You locked my money," I said, my voice low and steady. "Every dime, every penny," she confirmed, and I could hear the smile in her voice. "The cards are declined. The checking account is sealed. Even that little savings account you thought I did not know about at the credit union, it is all under my control now. So do not try to check into a hotel, Otis. Do not try to buy a plane ticket. You have nothing. The nursing home is paid for, though. If you turn that taxi around right now, they might still take you in. It is your only option. Do not be stubborn. Do not die in the street like a dog just to prove a point." I did not scream. I did not beg. I just breathed out a long, slow breath that fogged up the cold window glass. "You think money is what makes a man?" "Tiffany," I asked, "you think numbers on a screen are power? I think you are an old man with no kidney, no home, and $0. She laughed. "Goodbye, Otis. Stay warm." The line went dead. I looked at the phone screen. $0. She thought she had cut my throat. She thought she had stripped me naked. She had no idea who she was dealing with. She saw an old construction worker. She never asked what I did with the money I made in the 80s. She never asked why the toughest gang leaders in Chicago tipped their hats when I walked down the street. "Pull over here," I told the driver. He looked around nervously. We were in front of a place that looked like it had been condemned 10 years ago. Iron bars covered the windows. Graffiti covered the brick. A neon sign that said pawn and loan flickered with a dying buzz. Here the driver asked, "Man, I ain't waiting for you. This block is hot." "Just drop me off," I said, struggling to open the door. I stepped out onto the cracked sidewalk. The wind was brutal, whipping around the corner like it had a personal vendetta against me. The taxi peeled away, leaving me in a cloud of exhaust. I stood there for a moment, clutching my side, looking at the building. To the world, this was a junk shop. To Tiffany, it would be a place where desperate people sold their wedding rings for crack. But I knew the bricks. I knew the mortar. I knew them because I bought this building in 1982 for cash back when the city was burning and nobody wanted to touch the south side. And I didn't just buy this one. I bought the one next to it, and the apartment complex across the street, and the warehouse 2 blocks down. I owned this block. I owned the ground these people walked on. I just never put my name on the mailbox. I walked up to the heavy steel door and pressed the buzzer. Nothing happened. I pressed it again 3 short times, too long. A code from a lifetime ago. A slot in the door slid open. A pair of dark, suspicious eyes stared out. We closed. Old man, a voice growled. "Take your walk somewhere else." "Open the door, Jerome," I said, my voice cutting through the wind. "And tell your father his rent is due." The eyes went wide. The slot slammed shut. I heard the sound of 3 deadbolts disengaging one after another, heavy clunks of steel that sounded like music to my ears. The door swung open. A massive man stood there. He was 6'5", covered in tattoos, wearing enough gold chains to anchor a boat. This was Big Jerome, the man who ran the local streets. People crossed the street to avoid his shadow. But when he saw me, his shoulders dropped. He looked like a kid who just got caught with his hand in the cookie jar. "Mr. King," he stammered, stepping back to let me in. "Lord have mercy. We heard you was sick. We heard you was in the hospital." I walked past him into the warmth of the shop. It smelled of old dust and gun oil. I said, limping toward the back counter, "But I am better now." Jerome rushed to pull out a chair for me. He looked at my hospital clothes, my pale face, the way I was holding my side. He didn't ask questions. In our world, you don't ask questions, you just observe. "You need anything?" Mr. King Jerome asked, his voice low and respectful. "You need cash. You need a doctor. You need me to handle somebody." I sat down, wincing as the movement pulled at my stitches. "I don't need cash, Jerome," I said. "I need the book." Jerome paused. He looked at the other guys in the shop, 2 young toughs counting money in the corner. He jerked his head and they scrambled out the back door without a word. When we were alone, Jerome went behind the counter. He moved a display of cheap watches, pulled up a loose floorboard, and revealed a heavy gray floor safe. He spun the dial. Left, right, left. The heavy door clicked open. He reached inside and pulled out not stacks of money, but a thick, leather-bound ledger. It was old. The leather was cracked. It smelled of mildew and history. He placed it on the glass counter in front of me with both hands like he was presenting a holy Bible. I ran my hand over the cover. This was my bank. This was my insurance. Tiffany thought she was smart because she knew how to use online banking. She thought she was powerful because she could freeze a Wells Fargo account. She didn't understand that real power in this city isn't digital. Real power is debt. Real power is favors. Real power is knowing who did what in 1995 and helping them bury the problem. I opened the book. The pages were filled with my handwriting, names, dates, addresses, sums of money. I turned to the section marked properties. The apartment building on 53rd Street, I owned it through a shell company. The warehouse on the docks, mine. The laundromat chain that washed money for half the gangs in the city, mine. I had spent 40 years playing the fool, playing the simple construction worker. I let Darnell and Tiffany think I was just a blue-collar dad with a pension and a nice house. I did it to protect them. I wanted Darnell to be legit. I wanted him to be clean. I didn't want him to know that his college tuition was paid for by rent collected from crack houses and backroom poker games. I kept my hands dirty so his could be clean. And how did he repay me? By poisoning my blood, by cutting me open, by throwing me in the trash? Mr. King Jerome asked softly. "You okay?" "You got a look in your eye that's scaring me." I looked up at him. "Jerome," I said, "I need a phone, a burner, and I need you to make some calls." "Who we calling?" he asked. "Everybody," I said, turning the page of the ledger. "Call the tenants in the 53rd Street building. Call the manager at the warehouse. Call the boys at the docks. Tell them Otis is calling in the markers. Tell them the rent is due, but I don't want money." "What do you want then?" Jerome asked. I slammed the book shut. The sound echoed in the quiet shop like a gunshot. "I want war," I whispered. I stood up, the pain in my side suddenly feeling like fuel. I walked over to a mirror hanging on the wall behind a row of guitars. I looked at myself. I looked old. I looked tired. My skin was gray from the arsenic. My eyes were sunken. But inside those eyes, the fire was back, the fire that had built an empire from nothing. Tiffany thinks she locked me out, I said to the reflection. She thinks she holds the keys. She doesn't know I built the locks. I turned back to Jerome. Get me a suit, I ordered. Not this hospital trash. Get me my black suit, the one I keep in the back. And get me a car, not a taxi. I want the Lincoln. You going somewhere special? Jerome asked, already moving to obey. I smiled, and for the first time in days, it was a real smile, a dangerous smile. My son is having a recovery party, I said, and I think it is time the landlord paid a visit. They wanted my kidney. They can keep it. It will be the last thing I ever give them. But my life, my dignity, my city, I am taking it all back. And I am going to start by turning off the water. Let's see how thirsty they get in that big fancy house when the well runs dry. Let's see who survives the winter then. Bull Johnson's office smelled like expensive cigars and cheap ambition. It was tucked away on the second floor of a brownstone on Michigan Avenue that had survived 3 fires and 2 recessions. Bull was the kind of lawyer you did not find on billboards or TV commercials. If you were innocent, you hired a public defender. If you were guilty or if you were planning to start a war, you hired Bull. He was 70 years old, shaped like a beer keg, and wore pinstripe suits that cost more than my first truck. We had come up together in the South Side. I built the houses, and he kept the inspectors off my back. I sat in the leather chair across from his massive mahogany desk, wincing as the movement pulled at the stitches in my side. Bull was reading the papers. I had brought him the copies of the quitclaim deed Tiffany had tricked me into signing. He had his reading glasses perched on the end of his nose and a glass of scotch in his hand, even though it was only 10 in the morning. He read in silence for a long time. The only sound in the room was the ticking of the grandfather clock in the corner and the heavy rasp of my breathing. Finally, he took off his glasses and tossed the papers onto the desk. He did not look happy. "Otis, you want me to lie to you, or you want the truth?" He asked, his voice gravelly and deep. "I did not come here for fairy tales, Bull," I said. "Tell me." "It is airtight," he grumbled, leaning back in his chair. "That woman might be the devil, but she did her homework. The signature is yours. The witnesses are hospital staff who will testify you were conscious. The notary stamp is legit. Legally, the house, the structure, the bricks, and the mortar belongs to Tiffany and Darnell. If we try to fight this in probate court, we will be tied up for 3 years. She will drain the equity before we even get a hearing." I nodded slowly. I expected that. Tiffany was a shark. She would not have made a move unless she knew the water was safe. "Check the real estate listings, Bull," I said. He frowned but turned to his computer. He typed in my address. A few seconds later, he let out a low whistle. "Damn, Otis," he said. "She does not waste time. It is already up on Zillow, listed 3 hours ago. $5.2 million, cash offers preferred for a quick close." I closed my eyes. $5 million. That was my life's work. That was 40 years of waking up at 4 in the morning. That was the sweat off my back and the ache in my bones. And she was trying to liquidate it in 24 hours to fund whatever Ponzi scheme she was caught up in. "She is desperate," I said. "She owes money. Bad money. She needs that cash before the sharks come for her." Just then the burner phone I had bought at the pawn shop buzzed in my pocket. I had given the number to only one person besides Jerome, my son. I had texted him earlier, just a simple message: "I am alive." I looked at the screen. It was Darnell. I put it on speaker and set it on Bull's desk. Pop Darnell's voice came through thin and shaky. He sounded like he was crying. "Pop, are you okay?" I stared at the phone. I wanted to reach through it and shake him. I wanted to ask him how he could let them cut me open and throw me away. But I stayed silent. "Pop, please," he sobbed. "I am so sorry. I did not know she was going to kick you out so fast. I thought we would have more time to talk about it. But Tiffany, she says it is for the best. She says we need the money to start over. She says the house is too big for us anyway. You signed the papers too, Darnell." I said, my voice cold. "You watched her pack my bag." I know," he stammered. "But I am sick, Pop. I am so weak. I can't fight her. You know how she is. She just wants us to be secure." "Secure," I repeated, "by making your father homeless." Suddenly there was a scuffling sound on the other end of the line, a screech. Then Tiffany's voice cut through, sharp as a razor. "Stop calling him Darnell," she yelled. Then she spoke directly into the phone. "Listen to me, old man. I do not know where you are and I do not care. The house is sold. We have a buyer coming in an hour, a cash buyer from Dubai. By tomorrow morning, the money will be in an offshore account and there is nothing you or your ghetto lawyers can do about it. So go find a bridge to sleep under and leave us alone." The line went dead. Bull looked at me, his eyebrows raised. "That is a charming woman." I picked up the phone and put it back in my pocket. The pain in my side was throbbing again, but the fire in my gut was hotter. Darnell's apology was pathetic. He was not sorry for what he did. He was sorry he felt guilty about it. There is a difference. And Tiffany, she thought she had won. She thought the game was over because she held the deed to the house. But she forgot one thing. She forgot to check the history of the land. "Open the safe, Bull," I said. Bull looked confused, but he stood up and walked over to the wall safe behind a painting of the Chicago skyline. He spun the dial and opened the heavy door. Inside was a single yellowed document that I had asked him to keep for me 30 years ago. He pulled it out and blew the dust off the cover. The 1970 Land Trust Agreement. Bull read the title. "Otis. What is this? I haven't looked at this in decades." "I bought that land in 1970, Bull," I said, leaning forward. "Back then, they did not want to sell to black folks in that neighborhood. I had to set up a special arrangement. I had to buy the land separately from the structure that was on it. I tore down the old shack and built the mansion myself, but I never merged the deeds." I tapped the desk with my finger. "Tiffany has the quitclaim deed for the house, the structure, the walls, the roof, the swimming pool. She owns the building." I paused, letting a small, grim smile touch my lips. "But I own the dirt, Bull. I own the ground it sits on. And I own the infrastructure underneath it." Bull's eyes went wide. He flipped through the yellowed pages frantically, his legal mind racing to catch up. He stopped at page 12, his finger tracing a paragraph written in typewriter font. "The dead ground clause," he whispered, reading aloud. "In the event that the primary beneficiary of the land trust, that is you, Otis, does not reside within the primary structure, or if the structure is transferred to a hostile party without the consent of the trust, the landowner reserves the right to terminate all easements and access rights immediately." He looked up at me, a grin spreading across his face. "Easements, Otis. That means the driveway," I said. "That means the private road leading up to the house." And Bull continued reading further. "The landowner retains sole ownership and control of all subsurface private utilities installed by King Construction, including but not limited to the private water main and the dedicated electrical substation." "Exactly," I said. I leaned back in the chair, ignoring the pain. When I built that house, the city water lines did not reach that far out. I had to lay my own pipes. I had to run my own power lines from the main grid 3 miles away. Those pipes and those wires are not public property, Bull. They are private property, my property. I looked at the clock on the wall. "She has a buyer coming in an hour," I said. "A cash buyer. They are going to want to inspect the house. They are going to want to flush the toilets. They are going to want to turn on the lights to see the chandeliers." Bull started laughing. It was a deep belly laugh that shook the room. "You want to cut them off?" he choked out. "I do not want to sue her, Bull," I said. "I do not want to drag this out in court. I want to make that house uninhabitable. I want to make it worthless. A $5 million mansion is just a pile of fancy bricks if you cannot take a shower in it." But Otis, Bull said, wiping tears of laughter from his eyes, "Darnell is in there. He just had surgery. He is in a $5 million house," I said, my voice hardening. "He can buy bottled water. Or better yet, he can drink the expensive champagne they bought to celebrate kicking me out." I stood up. "Draft the notice, Bull. Not a lawsuit. A notice of termination of easement, delivering it to the utility companies. Tell them that the unauthorized use of my private infrastructure must stop immediately. Tell them to pull the meters." Bull was already typing, his fingers flying across the keyboard. "And Otis?" he asked without looking up. "Yeah. What about the driveway I walked to the door?" "I am going to handle the driveway myself," I said. "I have a buddy at the impound lot who owes me a favor. I think a couple of concrete barriers across the entrance will send the right message to that buyer from Dubai." I walked out of the office and back into the cold Chicago wind. I felt lighter. The pain was still there, but now it had a purpose. Tiffany wanted to play games with paper, fine. I was going to play games with physics. She stole the house. I was about to steal the ground from under her feet. I hailed a cab. Take me to the water department, I told the driver, and step on it. I have a valve to close. It had been exactly 1 week since they cut me open. 1 week since they stole a part of my body and threw the rest of me into the garbage. My side was still healing, the stitches pulling tight against my skin with every breath I took, but the pain had changed. It was no longer a sharp, screaming agony. It had settled into a dull, heavy throb, a constant reminder of what had been taken. But as the black Lincoln town car rolled slowly down the long, winding driveway of the estate I had built with my own hands, I did not feel like a victim. I felt like a judge arriving for sentencing. The house was lit up like a Christmas tree, even though it was late January. Every window I had framed, every archway I had leveled was glowing with golden light. I could hear the music from inside the car, a soft, expensive jazz that drifted out into the cold night air. The driveway was lined with luxury cars. Mercedes, BMWs, Teslas. They were parked on the asphalt I had laid oblivious to the man who owned the ground beneath their tires. Tiffany called it a recovery gala for Darnell. That is what the invitation said. But I knew better. There was a subtle sign near the gate, tasteful and discreet, that said open house. She was selling my life while pretending to celebrate my son's survival. I told Jerome to stop the car right at the front steps. I did not wait for him to open the door. I stepped out into the night. I was not wearing the stained sweatpants and the thin hospital jacket anymore. I was wearing my Sunday best, a three-piece black suit tailored in Italian wool, a crisp white shirt, and a silk tie that cost more than Tiffany's soul. I had my fedora pulled low, and I leaned on a cane, not because I needed it, but because it made me look like exactly what I was. A patriarch, a boss. The valet, a young kid in a red vest, looked confused. He didn't know whether to ask for my keys or ask me to leave. I ignored him and walked up the stone steps. The front door was open. The heat from inside spilled out, carrying the smell of expensive perfume and catering. I walked in. The foyer was packed. There were at least 50 people, mostly white, mostly wealthy, holding flutes of champagne and laughing that polite, hollow laugh that rich folks use when they are bored. They were admiring the crown molding I had installed. They were complimenting the marble floors I had selected, slab by slab. In the center of the room, near the grand staircase, stood Darnell and Tiffany. Darnell was sitting in a wheelchair, looking pale and weak, playing the part of the tragic survivor perfectly. He was wrapped in a cashmere blanket, accepting sympathies like they were donations. Tiffany stood beside him, her hand on his shoulder, looking radiant and victorious in a shimmering silver dress. She was talking to a couple who looked like they owned a bank, gesturing grandly toward the high ceilings. I tapped my cane on the marble floor. Once. Twice. The sound was sharp, like a gavel hitting a bench. The conversation near the door died down. People turned to look. The silence spread through the room like a wave rippling outward until the jazz music was the only thing left. Tiffany turned her head. Her smile froze. Her eyes went wide, not with fear, but with a flash of pure, unadulterated annoyance. She excused herself from the potential buyers and marched toward me, her heels clicking aggressively on the stone. "What are you doing here, Otis?" she hissed, keeping her voice low so the guests wouldn't hear. "I thought I made myself clear. You are trespassing." I looked past her at the guests, who were now whispering and staring. I saw Darnell shrink into his wheelchair, pulling the blanket up higher as if he could hide from me. "I am not trespassing, Tiffany," I said, my voice projecting just enough to be heard by the room. "I am just checking on my investment." 2 large security guards in black suits started moving toward me from the corners of the room. Tiffany raised a hand to stop them, realizing that dragging an old man out by force in front of buyers might spoil the mood. "You have 5 seconds to leave before I have you arrested for harassment." She smiled, a tight, venomous expression that didn't reach her eyes. "You look ridiculous, Otis. Did you steal that suit? You think playing dress-up changes the fact that you are homeless?" I reached into the inside pocket of my jacket. The security guards tensed, probably thinking I was reaching for a weapon. Tiffany flinched. "I did not bring a weapon," I said calmly. "I brought a bill." I pulled out a thick, cream-colored envelope. It wasn't wrinkled. It wasn't dirty. It was sealed with red wax. I held it out not to Tiffany but to Darnell. I walked past her. She was too stunned to stop me. I walked right up to my son. He looked up at me, his eyes full of terror and guilt. He looked at the kidney area of my suit, then at my face. "Pop," he whispered. please don't cause a scene." "I am not here to fight, son," I said gently. "I just wanted to give you this. It is the invoice for the kidney rental." A few guests chuckled nervously, thinking it was a joke. Darnell's hands shook as he took the envelope. "Open it," I said. He tore the seal. He pulled out the papers. They were not an invoice. They were photographs. High-resolution photographs taken by a private investigator I had hired 6 months ago, back when I first suspected Darnell was not just sick but secretive. The first photo was of Darnell in a hotel lobby in Atlanta. He wasn't in a wheelchair then. He was standing laughing with his arm around a young woman, a very young woman. The second photo was of that same woman holding a baby boy who had Darnell's eyes and Darnell's chin. The third document was a copy of a birth certificate. The father's name was listed clearly, Darnell King. Darnell went white. He dropped the photos on his lap. He couldn't breathe. He looked at Tiffany, then at me, then at the floor. Tiffany, who had been watching like a hawk, snatched the photos from his lap before he could hide them. She looked at the woman. She looked at the baby. She looked at the birth certificate. The room held its breath. Everyone knew Tiffany's brand. She was the pious, church-going wife. She posted Bible verses on social media every morning. She built her entire image on the sanctity of marriage and family values. I expected her to scream. I expected her to slap him. I expected her to crumble. That was why I brought the envelope. I wanted to drive a wedge between the two thieves. I wanted to watch them turn on each other. Tiffany stared at the photo of the illegitimate child for a long, agonizing 10 seconds. Then she did something that chilled my blood. She laughed. It was a short, dismissive sound. She looked up at me, her eyes completely dead of emotion. She didn't look at Darnell with anger. She looked at me with pity. "Is this it, Otis?" she asked, waving the photo of the baby. "This is your big play? You think showing me that Darnell has a bastard in Atlanta is going to make me kick him out? You think this is going to stop the sale?" She ripped the photo in half. Then she ripped the birth certificate. She tore them into tiny pieces and let them flutter down onto Darnell's lap like confetti. "You are so old-fashioned," she sneered, stepping closer to me so only I could hear. "You think I care where he puts his thing? You think I care if he has 5 kids in 5 different states?" She leaned in, her perfume thick and cloying. "I don't care about his morals, Otis. I care about his signature. I care about the $5 million this house is going to sell for tomorrow morning. We are not a love story. We are a corporation. And as long as the check clears, Darnell can sleep with the entire city of Atlanta for all I care. Money is the only god in this house now." She stepped back and turned to the security guards, snapping her fingers. "Get this trash out of my house. He is upsetting the buyers." I looked at Darnell. He was sitting there covered in the torn pieces of his secret life, looking small and pathetic. He didn't say a word. He didn't defend his child. He didn't defend his father. He just sat there and let his wife tear up his truth because he was too terrified of losing the money. The guards grabbed my arms. I shook them off. "Do not touch the suit," I warned them. "It costs more than your car." I adjusted my cuffs. I looked at Tiffany one last time. She was already turning back to the buyers, putting that fake plastic smile back on her face, apologizing for the interruption of the senile old man. "You are right, Tiffany," I said, raising my voice so it carried to the rafters. "Money is powerful. It buys houses. It buys silence. It even buys kidneys." I tapped my cane on the floor again. "But money cannot buy water," I said. Tiffany frowned, looking over her shoulder. "What are you talking about? Enjoy the champagne," I said, tipping my hat. "Drink as much as you can. It might be the last wet thing you touch in this house." I turned and walked out. The heavy oak doors closed behind me, shutting in the noise, the light, and the rot. I walked down the steps to the waiting Lincoln. The cold air felt clean against my face. Tiffany thought she had won because she had no shame. She thought that because she didn't care about adultery, she was invincible. She thought the only thing that mattered was the deed to the house. I got into the car and looked at the glowing mansion one last time. "Drive," I told Jerome. "Take me to the water main access point on 43rd Street. Jerome put the car in gear. "You sure about this, Mr. King? It is going to cause a hell of a mess." I looked at the torn pieces of paper in my mind, the image of my son cowering under a blanket. "They are thirsty for money, Jerome," I said, watching the house disappear in the rearview mirror. "Let's see how they like being thirsty for everything else." I sat back in the leather seat. The party was just getting started inside. But outside in the dark under the frozen ground, the real party was about to begin. And I was the one controlling the tap. The sun came up over Chicago like a bruised eye, purple and swollen. It was a cold morning, the kind that freezes the breath in your lungs, but for the first time in days, I felt warm. I was sitting on a folding chair at the edge of Jackson Park Lagoon, a fishing rod in my hand, watching the gray water ripple in the wind. I wasn't really fishing. I didn't have any bait on the hook. I was just waiting. I was waiting for the phone to ring. I was waiting for the scream. 5 miles away in the mansion I built the show was about to begin. I knew Tiffany's schedule better than she knew it herself. 9:00 a.m. That was when the cash buyer from Dubai was coming back for the final walkthrough. Tiffany would have the house staged to perfection. Fresh flowers in the foyer, the fireplace crackling, the smell of brewing coffee and vanilla candles masking the rot of her soul. She would be walking them through the master suite, showing off the dual rain showers and the infinity tub. She would be talking about flow and feng shui. I checked my watch. 9:15 a.m. Right about now, the buyer would ask to use the bathroom. Or maybe Tiffany would turn on the kitchen tap to show off the water pressure. I closed my eyes and imagined the sound. The sputter, the cough of air in the pipes, the dry, hollow hiss of a faucet with nothing behind it. My phone buzzed. It wasn't a call. It was a text from Jerome, who was parked down the street from the house. Target is panic. Buyer just walked out. She is screaming at the meter man. I smiled and cast my line a little further into the water. Back at the house, the scene was playing out exactly as I had designed it. The water didn't just stop. It vanished. The 5 bathrooms in the house were now useless porcelain statues. The radiant floor heating system, which relied on hot water circulation, dead. The massive aquarium in the study. The filters were sucking air, and the swimming pool. Well, without the circulation pumps running, and with the main drain valve I had remotely triggered to flush mode before cutting the power, the water level was dropping fast, leaving a ring of scum and the smell of chlorine turning stagnant. I could see it in my mind. The buyer, a serious man in a tailored suit, trying to wash his hands and getting nothing but a blast of rusty air. Tiffany smiling that frozen plastic smile, apologizing, blaming the city, blaming a burst main. She would run to the phone. She would call the Chicago Department of Water Management. She would scream at some poor clerk, and that clerk would look up the address. He would see the flag on the account, and he would say the words that would bring her world crashing down. "I am sorry, ma'am. That address is not serviced by the city. That is a private line owned by OK Construction. The owner requested a service termination." The phone in my pocket started ringing. It was Tiffany. I let it ring. I watched a duck paddle by, unbothered by the cold. It rang again. And again. She was persistent, I'll give her that. Rats usually are when the ship starts sinking. I waited until the 10th call before I picked up. "Hello?" I answered, my voice calm like I had all the time in the world. "Turn it back on!" she shrieked. Her voice was so loud I had to hold the phone away from my ear. There was no hello, no how are you, just pure unadulterated panic. "Turn what back on, Tiffany?" I asked, adjusting my hat. "The water, you old psycho. The water. The buyer just left. He walked out. He said he doesn't buy broken houses. Do you have any idea what you just did? You cost me $5 million. I reeled in my line a little. "I didn't cost you anything," I said. "I just exercised my rights as a landowner. You own the faucets, Tiffany. You own the pipes inside the walls, but the water that flows through them, that comes from my ground, and I don't give away my resources to strangers." "You are going to jail," she screamed. "I called the police. I called your lawyer. This is illegal. You can't cut off utilities to a residence." "There is a sick person in here. Darnell needs water." I paused. The mention of Darnell stung, but I pushed the feeling down. "Darnell has a credit card," I said. "He can order Evian. I'm coming to find you." "Otis," she yelled, "I know where you are. Jerome's idiot cousin told me you were at the lagoon. You better be there when I arrive, or I swear to God." She hung up. I put the phone down and poured myself a cup of coffee from my thermos. I wasn't running. I wanted her to come. I wanted her to look me in the eye when she realized that her $5 million kingdom was built on sand. 20 minutes later, a white Range Rover screeched into the gravel parking lot of the park. It was going way too fast. It skidded sideways, kicking up dust and rocks, almost hitting a lamppost. Tiffany jumped out. She wasn't wearing her realtor blazer anymore. She was in a messy bun and a tracksuit, looking like a woman on the edge of a nervous breakdown. She spotted me on the pier and marched over, her face red with rage. "Fix it," she demanded, stopping just inches from my chair. "Fix it right now. Call the company and tell them it was a mistake. I didn't look up." I kept my eyes on the bobber floating in the water. "It wasn't a mistake," I said. She kicked my tackle box. It skittered across the wood planks, spilling hooks and sinkers everywhere. "Stop playing games," she screamed. "Do you know what it smells like in that house? The toilets won't flush. Otis, Darnell is throwing up. He needs to be bathed. He has an incision that needs to be cleaned." "Then take him to a hotel," I said quietly. "Oh wait, you can't." "Because I froze the accounts." She grabbed the collar of my jacket, her nails digging into the wool. "You are a monster," she spat. "You are trying to kill your own son." I looked up then. I looked right into her eyes. "I gave him a kidney," I said, my voice low and dangerous. "I gave him life. And you two took it and tried to erase me. You want to talk about monsters?" "Look in the mirror, girl." She let go of me, stepping back as if burned. She realized that physical intimidation wasn't going to work. I was old, but I was made of iron. She took a breath, trying to compose herself, trying to switch tactics. The tears started. Fake tears. I had seen them 1,000 times. "Otis." "Please," she sobbed, clasping her hands together. "Look, I'm sorry. Okay, I'm sorry about the nursing home. I was stressed. Darnell was sick. We weren't thinking clearly. But you made your point. You won. Please just turn the water back on. We can talk about the house. We can work something out." I watched her performance. It was good, Oscar-worthy, but I knew the script. "There is nothing to work out," I said. "You want the water? You can have it." Her eyes lit up. "Really? Thank you, Otis. I knew you were a reasonable man. I'll call the buyer back and—" "It will cost you $1 million, I interrupted. She froze. "What?" "A reconnection fee," I said, shrugging. "Okay. Construction charges a premium for emergency services. $1 million. Cash. Deposited into the account of my choosing." "You're insane," she whispered. "We don't have $1 million liquid. You know that. All our money is tied up in the house." "Then you better sell it fast," I said. "Oh, but wait. You can't sell a house with no water. Sounds like a dilemma, Tiffany." She stared at me with pure hatred. The mask slipped completely. "I will see you dead," she hissed. "I will wait until that other kidney fails, and I will laugh at your funeral." My phone buzzed again. This time it wasn't Tiffany. It was Dr. Hart. I held up a finger to silence Tiffany and answered. "Otis," the doctor's voice was tight with urgency. "Where are you fishing?" I said. "What's wrong? Darnell just called me," she said. "He's running a fever, a high one. 103. He says he's dizzy and he stopped producing urine." My hand tightened on the rod. Stopped producing urine meant the kidney was shutting down. "Is it the rejection?" I asked. "It's dehydration and stress," Dr. Hart said. "He's not drinking enough fluids because the water is off and the cortisol levels from the panic are spiking his blood pressure." "Otis, listen to me. If he doesn't get hydrated and stabilized in the next hour, that kidney is going to infarct. It will die. And he might go septic." I looked at Tiffany. She was watching me, trying to figure out who I was talking to. She saw the change in my face. She saw the flicker of fatherly fear that I couldn't hide. "Is it Darnell?" she asked, stepping closer. "Is he okay?" I listened to Dr. Hart. "He needs to go to the ER, Otis," the doctor said. "Now." I lowered the phone. "Your husband is dying," I told Tiffany. Her face went pale. "What Dr. Hart says, he has a fever of 103. His kidneys are shutting down from dehydration." Tiffany didn't move toward her car. She didn't pull out her phone to call 911. She looked at me and I saw the gears turning in her head. She wasn't thinking about Darnell's life. She was thinking about the asset. If Darnell died, the house was hers free and clear. But if Darnell died, she lost the sympathy card. She lost the victim narrative. "Call an ambulance!" I yelled at her, breaking my own composure. "Go!" She stood there for a second longer, weighing her options. Then she sneered at me. "If he dies, it's murder, Otis, and I will make sure everyone knows you did it." She spun around and ran back to the Range Rover. She peeled out of the lot, leaving a cloud of dust that settled on my coat. I sat there alone on the pier. The silence of the lake felt heavy now. I looked at the water. I had turned it off to teach them a lesson. I had turned it off to save my dignity. But now my son was burning up in that dry, empty house. I put the phone to my ear again. Dr. Hart was still on the line. "Alana," I said, my voice trembling. "I'm here, Otis." "Go to the house," I said. "Pick him up. If Tiffany doesn't take him, you take him." "I'm already on my way," she said. "But Otis, you need to know something. I ran a toxicology screen on the blood sample we took from you yesterday. The arsenic levels are dropping. You're getting better." "But Darnell," his blood work from the hospital before discharge showed something else. What I asked. "He wasn't just taking the meds we gave him," she said. "There were traces of diuretics in his system. Water pills." I frowned. "Why would he take water pills?" "He needs hydration." "Exactly," she said. "Someone was giving him diuretics to dehydrate him on purpose, to make him look sicker, to make the recovery look harder so they could delay your return to the house." Tiffany. She was drying him out. She was killing him not just by cutting the water, but by chemically draining him. She was risking my kidney just to keep up the charade. "Get him out of there, Alana," I commanded. "Break the door down if you have to." I hung up. I reeled in my line. The hook was empty, but I had caught something much bigger than a fish. I had caught the truth. Tiffany wasn't just a thief. She was a black widow, and she was spinning a web that was about to strangle my son. I stood up, ignoring the pain in my side. The fishing trip was over. It was time to go hunting. I walked to the Lincoln where Jerome was waiting. "Where to?" Boss Jerome asked. "The hospital," I said. And Jerome, "Yeah, call the boys. Tell them to find out where Tiffany banks, not the joint accounts. The secret ones. The ones she thinks I don't know about." "You got it." I looked out the window as we drove away. The city looked cold and hard, but I was harder. I was Otis King. And nobody hurts my blood, not even my blood. The smell of a hospital never changes. It does not matter if it is a state-run clinic in the South Side or this 5-star medical palace where my son was currently lying. It always smells like rubbing alcohol and fear. I sat in the waiting room staring at the scuffed tips of my dress shoes. Bull Johnson sat next to me reading a newspaper, but I knew he wasn't really reading. He was watching me. He was waiting for me to break. He was waiting for the father inside me to override the businessman. My phone sat on my knee. It was silent, but it felt heavy like a loaded gun. I closed my eyes, and for a second, I was not 72 years old. I was 52. I was sitting in a different chair in a much smaller room holding a much softer hand. Lucille, my wife, my queen. People think I became a hard man because of the construction business. They think pouring concrete makes your heart turn to stone. They are wrong. I became hard the day Lucille died. She passed away 20 years ago, almost to the day. Her kidneys failed. We were broke back then. Or at least that is what everyone thought. We were living check to check, trying to keep the business afloat, trying to keep food on the table. When the doctor said she needed dialysis 3 times a week and then eventually a transplant, we looked at the bank account. It was empty. I remember the sound of her breathing in that last week. It was a rattle like dry leaves skittering across pavement. She squeezed my hand and told me it was okay. She told me not to worry about the money. She told me she was tired anyway. I watched the woman who had carried my bricks and packed my lunches fade away into a gray, silent ghost. When we buried her, I swore on her grave that I would never be poor again. I swore that no one in my family would ever die because we could not write a check. That was the fuel that built the empire. That was the fire that made me buy the apartment buildings and the warehouses. I worked 20 hours a day to outrun the ghost of poverty. My phone buzzed, shattering the memory. It was Darnell. I stared at the screen. My thumb hovered over the decline button. I knew I shouldn't answer. I knew he was going to manipulate me. But he was my son, and he was in a hospital bed just like his mother. I slid the bar to answer and put the phone to my ear. I did not say hello. Pop. His voice was weak, raspy, filled with a panic that sounded too familiar. Pop, why are you doing this? I stayed silent. I looked at the white wall across the room. The doctor says my levels are critical, Darnell cried. I am scared, Pop. I am so scared. How can you sit there and let this happen? How can you turn off the water? How can you cut off the money? You cut yourself off, Darnell. I said, my voice steady. You and your wife made that choice when you put my clothes in a garbage bag. There was a silence on the other end, and then his voice changed. The fear turned into something ugly, something sharp and accusatory. This is just like Mom, isn't it? He spat. I froze. My grip on the cane tightened until my knuckles turned white. What did you say? I whispered. You let Mom die too, Darnell hissed. I remember. I was 18. I remember you sitting at the kitchen table saying we didn't have the money for the better treatment. You let her fade away because you were too cheap to sell the truck. And now you are doing it to me. You are a killer, Pop. You hoarded your money then and you are hoarding it now. You want me to die just like you wanted her to die. The line went dead. I slowly lowered the phone. The air in the room felt thin. I couldn't breathe. The accusation hung in the air like smoke. You let Mom die. Bull folded his newspaper. He had heard the yelling coming from the phone. He looked at me with sad, tired eyes. He is desperate, Otis Bull said gently. He is lashing out. He doesn't mean it. He means it. I said, my voice sounding hollow. He has believed that for 20 years. He thinks his mother died because we were poor. He thinks I failed her. Bull sighed and leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. Well, Otis, maybe it is time to tell him the truth. Maybe if he knew. No, I cut him off. Otis, look at you, Bull said, pointing a finger at me. You are eating yourself alive. You are letting that boy play the victim. You are letting him rewrite history. He thinks he is a martyr. He thinks he is the son of a stingy, heartless man who let his mother die to save a few dollars. I stood up. The pain in my side flared, but I ignored it. I walked to the window and looked out at the parking lot. He was 18, Bull, I said quietly. Do you remember what happened when he was 18? Bull nodded slowly. I remember. I turned back to face the lawyer. Darnell doesn't remember, I said. Or maybe he chose to forget. He was a freshman in college. We were so proud, the first king to go to university. But he wasn't studying. He was gambling. He found a bookie in the dorms. He started with football, then poker. Within 3 months, he was in a hole so deep he couldn't see the sky. I walked back to my chair but didn't sit down. I paced the small room. $30,000, I said. That was the debt. The bookie was not a nice man. He sent 2 guys to the dorm. They broke Darnell's roommate's nose just as a warning. They told Darnell that if he didn't pay by Friday, they weren't going to break his nose. They were going to break his knees. They were going to make sure he never walked again. I stopped pacing. I looked at Bull. Darnell came home that weekend. He was crying. He was shaking. He told us everything. He begged us to save him. And Lucille, Bull whispered. Lucille had just gotten the diagnosis, I said, my voice cracking. We had $40,000 saved in the coffee can under the floorboards. It took us 10 years to save that money. That was the dialysis money. That was the kidney transplant fund. That was her life. I closed my eyes and I could see her face again. I could see her sitting at that kitchen table looking at our terrified, sobbing son. She didn't hesitate. She didn't look at me for permission. She stood up, walked to the loose board in the pantry and pulled out the cash. She put it in Darnell's hands. I remember what she said, I told Bull. She kissed his forehead and said, My boy needs to walk more than I need to stay. Otis. Bull shook his head. We paid the debt, I said. We saved his legs. And 3 months later, Lucille died because we couldn't afford the private clinic that could have expedited her treatment. She died so he could live. She died so he wouldn't be crippled. And we never told him, I finished, the anger rising in my chest. We never told him that the money used to pay off his stupidity was the money meant to save his mother's life. We let him believe we were just broke. We protected him from the guilt. We carried that cross so he could walk light. And now, Bull said, his voice hard, now he uses her death as a weapon against you. I looked at the phone in my hand. Darnell had just accused me of killing the woman who sacrificed herself for him. He had twisted the greatest act of love I had ever seen into a weapon to guilt me into giving him more. He is not a victim, Bull, I said, and for the first time I felt the last cord of attachment snap. I always thought Darnell was just weak. I continued. I thought he was just easily led, that Tiffany was the puppet master. I told myself that if I could just get rid of her, I could save him. But I was wrong. I looked at Bull and my eyes were dry. He is a leech, Bull. A leech from the egg. He took his mother's life to pay for his gambling. Now he takes my kidney to pay for his lifestyle. He consumes. That is all he does. He eats the people who love him. I grabbed my cane and walked to the door. "Where are you going?" Bull asked. "To the room," I said. To tell him Bull asked. To tell him the truth about the money. I paused at the door. "No," I said. "The truth is for people who have a conscience. The truth is for people who can feel shame. Darnell is beyond that. If I tell him, he won't care. He will just be glad the debt was paid." "Then what are you going to do?" "I am going to finish it," I said. "He asked me if I want him to die. I am going to go in there and tell him that I don't care if he lives or dies. I am going to tell him that the bank of Otis King is permanently closed. Not just the money, the love, the protection, the guilt. It is all gone." I opened the door. "Lucille protected him from the consequences of his actions," I said. "I protected him for 20 years. Today, for the first time in his life, Darnell is going to stand naked in the storm. Let's see if he can survive without using someone else's body as a shield." I walked out into the hallway. The smell of the hospital was still there, but it didn't scare me anymore. I wasn't the grieving husband. I wasn't the worried father. I was the executioner of my own legacy, and I was ready to swing the axe. The morning news was playing on the cracked television in the corner of Jerome's back office. I sat there with a cup of stale coffee watching my reputation being demolished faster than any building I had ever torn down. Tiffany was on Channel 5. She was sitting on a beige sofa clutching a tissue looking like a shattered angel. She had hired a PR firm, I could tell. Her hair was down, making her look vulnerable. She wasn't wearing jewelry. She was playing the role of the terrified wife to perfection. The headline on the bottom of the screen read in bold red letters, "The monster father, hero son, left to die of thirst." I listened to her voice. It was shaking just the right amount. She told the reporter that I had snapped. She said that the surgery had affected my mind, that I had become paranoid and violent. She claimed that Darnell was a hero who had tried to care for his senile father, and in return, I had cut off their water in the middle of a medical crisis. She looked right into the camera, her eyes big and wet, and said, "Otis, if you are watching this, please just turn the water back on. We forgive you. We just want Darnell to live." I took a sip of coffee. It tasted like ash. The world was eating it up. I scrolled through the comments on my phone. People who didn't know me, people who had never worked a day in their lives, were calling for my head. They called me a savage. They called me a demon. Someone posted my old address. Someone else said they hoped my other kidney failed. Tiffany had weaponized the entire city of Chicago against me in less than 12 hours. She knew she couldn't win in court because of the deed clause, so she took the fight to the court of public opinion. She wanted to shame me into submission. Then came the knock on the door. It wasn't a customer knock. It was the heavy, authoritative pound of the law. Jerome looked at me from behind the counter. I nodded. He hit the buzzer. 2 detectives walked in. I recognized the older one, Detective Miller. He had been around the neighborhood for years. He looked tired. He didn't pull his gun, but he kept his hand near his belt. "Mr. King," Miller said, stopping in front of my chair. "We need to talk." I didn't stand up. I put my coffee down slowly. "Am I under arrest, Miller?" I asked. "Not yet," he said, his voice hard. "But the district attorney is looking at charges. Endangerment of a vulnerable adult. Reckless conduct. If your son's condition gets worse, Otis, we are looking at attempted manslaughter. You can't just cut off utilities to a sick man." I leaned forward, fighting the throb in my side. "I didn't cut off a sick man, Miller. I terminated a service contract on a private commercial property. If they want water, they can dig a well, or they can move." Miller shook his head. "This isn't a contract dispute anymore, Otis. This is on the news. The mayor is calling the chief. You look like the villain here. You need to turn that valve back on, or I'm going to have to take you in." I looked Miller in the eye. "Did you ask her why she kicked me out 3 days after surgery?" I asked. "Did you ask her about the arsenic?" Miller frowned. "What arsenic?" I reached into my pocket, but Miller flinched. I moved slowly, pulling out not a weapon but the flash drive Dr. Hart had given me. "Tiffany tells a good story, Miller," I said. "But stories are wind. I deal in concrete, and I deal in proof." I stood up, grabbing my cane. "I am not turning the water on," I said, "and I am not going to the station with you, not until I tell my side." Miller hesitated. He knew me. He knew I wasn't a crazy man. He knew I had built half the precinct houses in this district. "You have 1 hour, Otis," he said, checking his watch. "If that water isn't on in 60 minutes, I'm coming back with a warrant, and I won't be asking nicely." The detectives walked out. The clock was ticking. I turned to Jerome. "Where is your nephew?" I asked. "The one who does the computer stuff." "Malik. He's in the back," Jerome said, "playing video games." "Get him," I said, "and get me a ring light. We are going live." 10 minutes later, I was sitting in front of a laptop in the dusty storage room. Malik, a skinny kid with dreadlocks and thick glasses, was setting up the stream. He looked at me nervously. "Uncle Otis, you sure about this?" he asked. "The comments are nasty. They are roasting you, man." "Just turn it on, Malik," I said, "and be ready to play the files on the drive when I give the signal." He nodded and clicked a button. The screen flashed. Live. The viewer count started at 0, then jumped to 50, then 500, then 5,000. The algorithm was pushing it because of the news. I watched the comments roll in. "Murderer. Evil old man. Die." I looked straight into the camera lens. I didn't smile. I didn't cry. I looked like what I was, a man who had been pushed too far. "My name is Otis King," I began. My voice was gravel and steel. "I am 72 years old. I don't have a PR firm. I don't have a makeup artist, and I don't have a script." I paused. The view count hit 10,000. "You all saw Tiffany on the news," I continued. "You saw her tears. You heard her call me a monster because I turned off the water to my own house. You think I am cruel. You think I am senile." I leaned in closer. "But there is one thing Tiffany forgot to tell you. She forgot to tell you why I am not in that house. She forgot to tell you how I ended up on the street with 20 staples in my gut." I signaled Malik. "Play the tape," I said. The screen split. On one side was my face. On the other side was grainy black and white footage from a hospital security camera. It was dated 4 days ago. The timestamp showed 600 a.m. "This is the recovery room," I narrated as the video played. "That is me in the bed, heavily sedated. That woman standing over me is Tiffany." The world watched as Tiffany in the video grabbed my limp hand. They watched her jam a pen into my fingers. They watched her aggressively force my hand to sign a stack of papers over and over again. They saw me try to pull away, and they saw her slap my hand down to keep it on the paper. "That is your sweet, innocent victim," I said, my voice rising. "That is Tiffany forging a deed transfer while I was high on morphine. She wasn't holding my hand to comfort me. She was stealing my home." The comments slowed down. The murderer insults stopped. Question marks started appearing. "Now play the next one," I ordered. The video switched. This was the hallway camera. 11:00 a.m., 3 days post-op. The video showed a wheelchair being pushed out of the elevator. It showed Tiffany walking beside it. It showed her stopping at the curb. And then it showed the moment that changed everything. The camera clearly caught her throwing a black garbage bag at my chest. It caught her pointing her finger in my face. And it caught the moment she turned her back and walked away, leaving an old man shivering in the cold. I let the video play for a few seconds of silence. Just me alone on the curb, looking small and broken. "You call me a monster because I cut the water," I asked the camera. "I gave my son a kidney on Tuesday. On Friday they threw me out like trash. They didn't care if I froze. They didn't care if I bled. They just wanted the house." I looked at the camera with burning intensity. "I didn't turn off the water to kill them," I said. "I turned it off because that house is a crime scene. I turned it off because I built those pipes with my own hands, and I will not let thieves drink from my well." I held up the flash drive. And to the Chicago Police Department I said, "You want to arrest someone for endangerment? Come look at these tapes. Come look at the toxicology reports my doctor has. Come see who the real monster is." I nodded to Malik. "Cut it." The screen went black. I sat back in the chair, exhaling a breath I felt like I had been holding for a week. The room was silent. Jerome was staring at me with his mouth open. Malik looked like he wanted to high-five me. "Did we get them?" Malik asked. I picked up my phone. I refreshed the news feed. The reaction was instantaneous. It was a tsunami. The internet, which had been ready to crucify me, turned on a dime. The video clips were already being shared thousands of times. Twitter was exploding. Justice for Otis was trending #1 in Chicago. People were analyzing the footage. They were zooming in on Tiffany's face in the video. The shattered angel narrative evaporated. Now they saw the predator. They saw the greed. Then my phone rang. It wasn't the police. It was a real estate agent. Not Tiffany's agent. A random one. "Mr. King," the voice said fast. "I'm sorry to bother you. I'm watching the stream. I just wanted to tell you. I had a client interested in the house." "Yeah," I grunted. "We are pulling the offer," he said. "And frankly, sir, nobody is going to touch that property. That house is radioactive. After what the world just saw, Tiffany couldn't give that mansion away for free. You destroyed the market value in 10 minutes. I hung up. I looked at the TV in the corner. The news station had interrupted their regular broadcast. They were no longer showing Tiffany's interview. They were playing my security footage on a loop. The anchor was using words like shocking allegations and elder abuse. I stood up. My legs felt stronger. The pain in my side was still there, but it felt different now. It was the pain of victory. "Miller isn't coming back with a warrant," I told Jerome. "How do you know?" Jerome asked. "Because I said, pointing at the screen where a reporter was now standing in front of my house looking for Tiffany. The police don't arrest heroes. And right now, the whole city knows who the bad guy is." I put on my hat. "Let's go, Jerome." "Where to?" "To the hospital," I said. "I have a feeling Tiffany is going to try to run, and I want to be there to make sure she doesn't take my son with her." The court of public opinion had delivered its verdict. Guilty. Now it was time for the real law to finish the job. I walked out of the pawn shop, and for the first time since the surgery, I didn't feel the cold. I felt the heat of a city that finally had my back. Desperation has a smell. It smells like sour sweat mixed with expensive perfume trying to cover it up. I know that smell because I spent 40 years working in construction, and I have seen men smell like that right before they try to bribe a building inspector or cut corners on a foundation. But I never thought I would smell it coming from my own daughter-in-law. 2 days had passed since the live stream went viral. 2 days since the world saw Tiffany for what she really was. The fallout was nuclear. Her real estate license was suspended pending an investigation. Her face was plastered on every local blog and news site. The buyers who had been lining up to purchase the mansion had vanished like smoke. Nobody wanted to buy a house that was famous for being a torture chamber for an old man. Tiffany was trapped in a $5 million cage with no running water, a dying husband, and bills that were stacking up like bricks. And she had secrets. Expensive secrets. I had Jerome dig into her finances, and what he found was ugly. Tiffany wasn't just greedy. She was a gambler. Not with cards like Darnell, but with high-risk investments. She had leveraged herself to the hilt, borrowing money to buy crypto. Borrowing money to flip condos that never sold. She was drowning in debt, and the sharks were circling. She needed cash. Fast. She needed enough to pay off her investors and keep up the appearance of being rich until she could figure out a way to sell the house. And since I had frozen the bank account, she had nowhere to turn. Nowhere legitimate, at least. That is why I was sitting in the back room of a dim, smoke-filled office in the back of a pool hall on 63rd Street. Through the one-way mirror, I could see the front office. It was run by a man named Silas. To the world, Silas was a loan shark, a man you went to when the bank said no, and you didn't mind paying 50% interest. He was terrifying. He had a scar running down his cheek and hands the size of shovels. But to me, Silas was just the kid I hired in 1992 to haul debris. I had paid for his mother's funeral when nobody else would. Silas owed me his life, and today he was going to pay me back. The buzzer on the front door rang. Silas looked at the mirror, nodded slightly, and pressed the release. Tiffany walked in. She looked like a wreck. She was wearing big sunglasses and a scarf over her head, trying to look incognito, but she was still carrying a Birkin bag that cost more than everything in this room combined. She looked around nervously, wrinkling her nose at the smell of stale cigarettes. "Are you Silas?" she asked, her voice shaking but still trying to sound superior. Silas didn't stand up. He just leaned back in his leather chair and stared at her. "That depends on who's asking," he rumbled. "I was referred to you," she said, clutching her bag tight, "by a friend. They said you handle private lending, high volume, cash." Silas laughed. It was a dry, scratching sound. "I lend money, lady, but I don't know you, and I don't lend to strangers without collateral." Tiffany stepped forward. She pulled down her sunglasses. Her eyes were red-rimmed and frantic. "My name is Tiffany King," she said. "I own the estate on Lakeshore Drive. The one in the news." "Oh, right." Silas grinned, showing a gold tooth. "The lady who cuts off the water." "You are famous." Tiffany flinched. Look, that is all a misunderstanding. The point is, I have assets. Massive assets. The house is worth $5 million. I just have a liquidity issue right now because of the legal drama. I need a bridge loan. Just for a month, until the house sells. How much? Silas asked. 200,000, she said. I sat in the dark room shaking my head. 200,000. That was exactly the amount she owed to her private investors who were threatening to sue her. She was trying to plug a hole in the Titanic with bubble gum. Silas didn't blink. 200 grand is a lot of paper, he said. And that house? It's radioactive right now. Nobody is buying it. It's a risk. I will pay double interest, Tiffany said quickly. Desperation was pouring off her now. I will pay you back 300,000 in 30 days. Silas tapped his fingers on the desk. He looked at the mirror. He knew I was watching. He knew the script. I don't care about interest, he said. I care about security. You want the cash? Fine. I have it in the safe right now. But we do this on my terms. Anything Tiffany said. Silas opened a drawer and pulled out a contract. It was 1 page. Simple. Brutal. You put the house up, he said. You sign a confession of judgment. You know what that is, right? You're a real estate lady. Tiffany nodded slowly. It means if I default, you don't have to sue me. You just take the property. Exactly, Silas said. But here's the kicker. Since you are high risk, the grace period is 0 days. If you miss the payment date by 1 minute, 1 single minute, the deed transfers to me. Immediately. No court, no arguments. You walk away with nothing. Tiffany hesitated. She looked at the paper. She looked at the exit. She knew this was insane. She knew this was a deal with the devil. But then her phone buzzed in her purse. Probably another creditor. Probably another threat. The panic took over. She grabbed the pen. Fine, she said. I will sell the house in 2 weeks. I have a new buyer lined up. You will get your money. She signed it. She signed away the only thing she had left. Silas took the paper. He checked the signature. Then he reached under the desk and pulled out a duffel bag. Count it if you want, he said. Tiffany unzipped the bag. It was full of cash. Stacks of $100 bills. My bills. I had withdrawn that money from my secret vault that morning. She was borrowing my own money to pay off her debts and putting my house up as collateral. It was the perfect circle. She didn't count it. She just zipped the bag up and slung it over her shoulder. Thank you, she said, regaining a little bit of her arrogance now that she had the money. You will have your payment in 2 weeks. Don't be late, Mrs. King, Silas said. I am not a patient man. She walked out the door, her heels clicking on the pavement, rushing to put out the fires in her life, unaware that she had just doused herself in gasoline. As soon as the door closed, I stepped out of the back room. Silas stood up and handed me the contract. She didn't even read the fine print, boss, Silas said, shaking his head. She never does, I said, looking at her signature. She thinks she can talk her way out of anything. She thinks contracts are just suggestions. I folded the paper and put it in my breast pocket right next to the picture of Lucille. Silas looked at the duffel bag she had taken. That was a lot of cash to let walk out the door, Otis. You sure she isn't going to run with it? She can't run, I said. She has to pay her investors or she goes to jail for fraud. That money is already spent. And even if she runs, she leaves Darnell behind. And she leaves the house. I walked over to the window and watched her get into her Range Rover. She was on the phone, probably screaming at someone, probably feeling like she had just pulled off a miracle. She doesn't know, I whispered. Doesn't know what Silas asked. She doesn't know that the new buyer she thinks she has lined up, the one she is counting on to pay you back. That is a shell company I set up yesterday. Silas started laughing. You are going to delay the closing, aren't you? I put on my hat. I am going to delay it exactly 31 days, I said. 1 day past her deadline with you. So she defaults, Silas said, understanding the play. She defaults, I confirmed. And then you foreclose. You take the house. And then you sell it back to me for $1. I turned to my old friend. She wanted to play in the big leagues, Silas. She wanted to be a tycoon. Well, this is lesson number 1 in business. Never borrow money from a man who wants your blood more than your cash. I walked out into the alley. The sun was setting, casting long shadows over the city. I felt a strange sense of calm. The trap was set. The bait was taken. Tiffany had just handed me the weapon to destroy her, and she thanked me for it. Now all I had to do was wait. And while I waited, I had one more stop to make. It was time to visit the hospital again. It was time to see if Darnell was ready to hear the truth or if he was going to go down with the ship his wife had just set on fire. The game was almost over. Checkmate was on the horizon, and the king was coming home. The waiting game is the hardest part of any war. You set the trap, you dig the trench, and then you sit in the silence and wait for the enemy to make a mistake. I did not have to wait long. Darnell was his own worst enemy. He always had been. When life got hard, Darnell did not dig in his heels. He ran, and when he could not run, he hid inside a bottle. I found out later from Dr. Hart what had actually happened in those 48 hours after I cut the water. Darnell did not drink the bottled water Tiffany bought. He did not rest. He panicked. The stress of the live stream, the shame of the public backlash, and the terror of losing his lifestyle broke him. He checked into a luxury suite at the Ritz-Carlton, escaping the dry mansion, and he took his demons with him. He stopped taking the tacrolimus. That is the anti-rejection medicine. It is a harsh drug. It makes you shake. It makes you feel sick. Darnell wanted to feel good, so he replaced the pills with vodka and prescription painkillers. He treated the gift of life I gave him like a cheap toy he could abuse. He thought biology would wait for him to sober up. He was wrong. It was 3 in the morning when my phone rang. I was sleeping on a cot in the back of Jerome's shop, surrounded by pawned guitars and broken dreams. I knew the ringtone. It was the hospital. I picked up my heart hammering against my ribs, not out of fear, but out of a grim anticipation. "Mr. King, it's Alana Hart." I sat up, swinging my legs over the side of the cot. The concrete floor was cold, reminding me of the night they kicked me out. "Is he dead?" I asked. "No," she said, her voice tight and professional. "But he is in critical condition. The ambulance brought him in an hour ago. He was found unconscious in his hotel room. Acute rejection, Otis. His creatine levels are off the charts. The kidney, your kidney, is shutting down. We have him on emergency dialysis, but it doesn't look good." I rubbed my face with my hand. I felt the rough stubble of my beard. I felt old. "Where is his wife?" I asked. "Where is the dutiful Tiffany?" There was a pause on the line. A long, heavy silence that told me everything I needed to know. "She is not here, Otis. We called her. She said she couldn't come right now because she is meeting with her legal team to file an emergency injunction against you for the water shutoff. She said there is nothing she can do at the hospital anyway." I laughed. It was a dark, humorless sound that echoed in the empty shop. "She is suing me while her husband is dying," I said. "That sounds about right. I will be there in 20 minutes, Alana." I did not rush. I shaved. I put on my suit. I adjusted my tie. I wanted Darnell to see me not as the victim he threw away, but as the man he should have been. When I walked into the hospital, the night shift nurses stared at me. They recognized me from the news. They didn't stop me. One of them, a young black woman, actually nodded at me and held the elevator door. 4th floor, the VIP wing, the same wing where this nightmare started. I walked down the hallway. It was quiet, smelling of floor wax and antiseptic. I found room 402. The door was open. I stepped inside. The room was massive, more like a hotel suite than a hospital room. There was a leather couch, a flat-screen TV, and a view of the city skyline. But the man in the bed looked like he belonged in a morgue. Darnell was yellow. Jaundice had set in deep, turning his skin the color of old parchment. He was bloated, his face puffy and swollen from the fluids his body couldn't process. Tubes ran out of his neck, cycling his blood through a dialysis machine that hummed and clicked in the corner like a ticking bomb. He was awake. His eyes were open, staring at the ceiling, glassy and terrified. I pulled up a chair. I didn't sit close. I sat at the foot of the bed, just out of reach. Darnell turned his head slowly. It looked like it cost him every ounce of strength he had. When he saw me, his lip quivered. Tears started to leak from the corners of his eyes, running down into his ears. "Pop," he croaked. His voice was a wet, gurgling whisper. I folded my hands over the head of my cane and looked at him. I didn't see my son. I saw a stranger. I saw a man who had made a series of choices, one after another, that led him to this bed. "Where is she, Pop?" he asked. "Where is Tiffany?" I looked at the empty leather couch. I looked at the empty bedside chair. She is busy, Darnell, I said calmly. She is with her lawyers. She is trying to sue me to get the water turned back on. She thinks if she wins the lawsuit, the house will be worth something again. Darnell closed his eyes, a sob shaking his bloated chest. She said she loved me, he whispered. She said we were partners. You were partners in crime, son, I said. And there is no honor among thieves. When the ship sinks, the rats don't hold hands. They swim. And Tiffany is a very strong swimmer. He looked at me again, his eyes pleading. I am dying, aren't I? You are in trouble, I admitted. You stopped taking the meds, Darnell. Dr. Hart found the alcohol in your blood. You threw a party for yourself while your body was fighting to keep you alive. I was stressed. He cried out, his voice cracking. You don't understand. The pressure. Everyone looking at me. The money. I just wanted to feel normal for one night. You wanted to escape, I corrected him. Just like you escaped your gambling debts, just like you escaped the guilt of your mother's death, you have spent 40 years running away from reality, Darnell. But you can't run from biology. He tried to reach for my hand, but the restraints on his wrist held him back. Pop, please, he begged. I'm sorry. I swear to God I'm sorry. Help me. Give me another chance. Ask the doctors. Maybe they can fix it. Maybe you can... He stopped. He looked at my side where the scar was hidden beneath my suit. Maybe I can, what I asked, my voice dropping an octave. Maybe I can give you the other one. He didn't answer, but the hunger in his eyes said yes. He wanted me to strip myself bare to save him again. He wanted to consume the last piece of me. I stood up. The sound of the chair scraping against the floor was loud in the quiet room. I walked to the side of the bed and looked down at him. I looked at the machine filtering his blood. I looked at the monitor showing his failing vitals. Do you know why that kidney is failing, Darnell? I asked softly. He shook his head, terrified by the look in my eyes. The doctors will tell you it is the alcohol, I said. They will tell you it is the missing pills. They will tell you it is acute rejection caused by chemical imbalance. I leaned in closer until my face was inches from his. But I know the truth. I placed my hand on my own chest, feeling the steady, strong beat of my heart. That kidney is a part of me, Darnell. It came from a man who wakes up at 4 a.m. It came from a man who stood in the freezing rain to lay bricks so his family could eat. It came from a man who honors his debts and protects his blood. I pointed a finger at his chest, right where the surgical scar was oozing under the bandage. That kidney has a memory. It has DNA that is coded for strength. It has self-respect. Darnell whimpered, trying to turn away, but I wouldn't let him. It got inside your body and it looked around, I said, my voice trembling with suppressed rage. It looked at your blood. It tasted the cowardice. It felt the betrayal. It realized it was keeping a man alive who would throw his own father in the trash for a payout. I straightened up, towering over him. It isn't the alcohol killing that organ, son. That kidney is committing suicide. It is refusing to live in a cowardly body like yours. It would rather die than sustain a man with no honor. Darnell screamed. It was a thin, high-pitched wail of despair. He knew I was right. He felt it. He felt the rejection not just as a medical event, but as a judgment. Pop, don't leave me, he screamed as I turned to the door. I don't want to die alone. You are not alone, I said without looking back. You have your choices. You have your memories. And you have the ghost of the mother you blamed for 20 years. You have plenty of company. I walked out of the room. I heard him screaming my name over and over until the heavy door clicked shut and silenced him. I stood in the hallway for a moment, leaning on my cane, catching my breath. A nurse hurried past me toward room 402, looking concerned. Is he okay? She asked me. He is exactly where he belongs, I said. I walked to the elevator. The number changed from 4 to 3 to 2. I felt lighter. The burden of saving Darnell was finally gone. I had carried him for 40 years. I had carried him through school, through debt, through marriage. I had even carried him inside my own body. But I was done carrying. I walked out of the hospital into the cool night air. My phone buzzed. It was Jerome. Boss, he said. You need to see this. Silas just called. What is it? I asked, getting into the back of the Lincoln. Tiffany, Jerome said, and I could hear the grin in his voice. She just missed the deadline by 2 minutes. I looked at my watch. It was midnight. The day had turned. The contract expired, I asked. Expired, Jerome confirmed. Silas is already filing the paperwork. The house is ours. I looked back at the hospital tower. Up there on the fourth floor, my son was losing his life, and down here in the street, his wife had just lost her kingdom. Take me to the house, Jerome, I said. The house. But it's locked up, boss. Not anymore, I said. I have the keys. And I think it is time the landlord did a final inspection before the demolition. The war was over. The enemy was broken. And Otis King was the last man standing. The Cook County Courthouse smells of floor wax and broken promises. I had been in this building before, usually to file permits or settle disputes with subcontractors who tried to cheat me on drywall prices. But today was different. Today I wasn't here as a businessman. I was here as a defendant. I sat at the heavy oak table, my hands folded over the head of my cane, listening to the hum of the ventilation system. Next to me, Bull Johnson was arranging his papers with the precision of a surgeon. He didn't look worried. He looked like a man who was holding a royal flush in a game of penny poker. Across the aisle, Tiffany was putting on the performance of her life. She was wearing a modest cream-colored dress that made her look soft, vulnerable, and completely unlike the woman who had thrown a garbage bag at my chest. She had hired a new lawyer, a slick young guy in a shiny suit who looked like he chased ambulances for sport. They were whispering to each other, shaking their heads, looking at me with theatrical pity. The judge, the Honorable Evelyn Moore, walked in. She was a stern woman with glasses perched on the end of her nose and a reputation for having zero patience for family drama. She sat down, banged her gavel, and looked at us over her spectacles. This is an emergency hearing regarding the guardianship of Darnell King and a motion for injunctive relief regarding the property on Lakeshore Drive, Judge Moore said. Proceed. Tiffany took the stand first. She didn't walk. She floated. She dabbed at her eyes with a tissue before she even said a word. Her lawyer guided her through the testimony like he was walking a child through a minefield. Mrs. King, tell the court why we are here today, the lawyer said softly. Tiffany sniffled. Her voice was small, trembling just enough to break your heart if you didn't know she was a viper. I am here because I am terrified. Your Honor, she said, looking directly at the judge, my husband Darnell is in the ICU fighting for his life, and instead of helping us, his father, she pointed a shaking finger at me. His father has launched a campaign of terror against us. He cut off the water to our home. He froze our bank accounts. He left us unable to care for Darnell's hygiene during his recovery. She took a breath, playing the victim card with expert timing. Otis is not in his right mind. Your Honor, the surgery was too much for him at his age. He has become paranoid and vindictive. I am asking the court to grant me full emergency guardianship over Otis's finances and medical decisions, and to force him to turn the utilities back on before he kills his own son. The courtroom was silent. I could feel the eyes of the few reporters in the back burning into my neck. It was a compelling story. The senile, cruel father versus the devoted, suffering wife. Tiffany finished her testimony with a sob. I just want to save my husband, she whispered. Judge Moore looked at me. She didn't look impressed, but she didn't look convinced either. She turned to Bull. Mr. Johnson, your witness. Bull stood up slowly. He didn't button his jacket. He didn't pick up a notepad. He walked toward the witness stand with his hands in his pockets, looking like a grandfather asking about the weather. Mrs. King Bull said, his voice deep and rumbling. You say you are terrified for your husband's health. Is that correct? Yes, Tiffany said, narrowing her eyes slightly. Of course. And you say my client, Mr. Otis King, is the cause of your husband's current condition. He cut the water, Tiffany snapped, forgetting her soft voice for a second. Dehydration caused the kidney failure. Bull nodded slowly. Dehydration. Interesting. Tell me, Mrs. King, in the 6 months leading up to the surgery, did you do the cooking for the household? Tiffany blinked. She looked confused by the pivot. Yes, I cooked. I took care of both of them. I made sure they ate healthy. Sunday dinners were mandatory. I made special herbal teas for them. I did everything a wife and daughter-in-law should do. Special herbal teas, Bull repeated. Thank you. No further questions. Tiffany looked at her lawyer confused. She walked back to her seat, looking like she had just won a race she didn't know was still going on. Call your first witness, Mr. Johnson, the judge said. Bull turned to the back of the room. The doors opened. The defense calls Dr. Alana Hart to the stand. Tiffany went rigid. She knew Dr. Hart was my surgeon. She probably expected Dr. Hart to testify about my mental state. She didn't expect what was coming. Dr. Hart walked up the aisle. She was wearing her white coat over professional clothes. She looked tired, but her eyes were sharp. She took the oath and sat down. Dr. Hart Bull began. You are the chief transplant surgeon at Northwestern Memorial, correct? Yes, I am. And you performed the nephrectomy on Otis King and the transplant on Darnell King. I did. Bull walked over to his table and picked up a thick file. He handed it to the bailiff to give to the judge. Dr. Hart, can you explain to the court why Darnell King is currently in the ICU? Mrs. King claims it is due to dehydration caused by a water shutoff. Is that your medical opinion? Dr. Hart leaned into the microphone. Her voice was clear and clinical. No, it is not. While dehydration was a complicating factor, it was not the root cause. Darnell King is in the ICU because of acute organ rejection exacerbated by heavy metal toxicity. Tiffany's lawyer stood up. Objection relevance overruled, Judge Moore said, flipping through the file Bull had given her. Continue, doctor. Heavy metal toxicity, Bull repeated. What kind of metal, Dr. Arsenic? Dr. Hart said. A murmur went through the courtroom. Tiffany froze. Her face, which had been pale with fake grief, went dead white. Bull continued. And where was this arsenic found? We found high concentrations of arsenic in the hair follicles and nail beds of both Darnell King and Otis King, Dr. Hart explained. We also found acute levels in the kidney tissue we removed from Otis King, and based on the growth of the hair and nails, Bull asked, pacing in front of the stand. Can you determine a timeline for this poisoning? Yes, Dr. Hart said. The exposure began approximately 6 months ago. The levels increased steadily over time, peaking in the week before the surgery. Bull stopped pacing. He turned and looked directly at Tiffany. 6 months ago, he said. That would be right around the time Mrs. King started making those mandatory Sunday dinners and special herbal teas, wouldn't it? Objection, Tiffany's lawyer screamed, knocking his chair over as he stood up. This is speculation. This is an ambush. Judge Moore didn't look at the lawyer. She was reading the toxicology report. Her face had changed. The boredom was gone. In its place was the cold, hard glare of justice. Sit down, counselor, the judge ordered. She didn't raise her voice, but the tone made the lawyer drop back into his seat. Bull turned back to Dr. Hart. Doctor, is there any medical reason for 2 men in the same household to have identical lethal levels of arsenic in their systems other than environmental exposure or ingestion? No, Dr. Hart said. And since they lived in a modern home with filtered water and no industrial exposure, ingestion is the only logical conclusion. Bull turned to the judge. Your Honor, Tiffany King is asking for guardianship over my client because she claims he is mentally unstable. We submit that Otis King is not unstable. He is a victim of attempted murder. The fatigue and confusion he suffered prior to surgery were not symptoms of age. They were symptoms of chronic arsenic poisoning administered by the woman sitting across the aisle. Tiffany stood up. She couldn't help herself. The mask shattered completely. That is a lie, she shrieked. Her voice echoed off the high ceiling. You can't prove that. You are just trying to steal the house. Judge Moore slammed her gavel. The sound was like a gunshot. Sit down, Mrs. King, or I will hold you in contempt. Tiffany sat breathing hard, her hands clutching the table. She looked at her lawyer, but he was inching away from her. He saw the toxicology report. He knew the ship was sinking. Judge Moore took off her glasses. She looked at Tiffany with an expression that would have terrified a serial killer. This court came here to decide a civil matter regarding utilities and guardianship, the judge said. Her voice was ice cold. But what has been presented to me is evidence of a capital crime. She turned to the bailiff. Bailiff, secure the courtroom. No one leaves. She looked back at Tiffany. Mrs. King, your petition for guardianship is denied with prejudice. Furthermore, I am revoking your power of attorney over Darnell King effectively immediately as you are a person of interest in a criminal investigation regarding his health. Tiffany started to shake. Real shaking this time? You can't do this, she whispered. I am the victim. Judge Moore ignored her. She turned to the court clerk. Forward this transcript and the medical exhibits to the district attorney's office immediately. I am recommending an immediate criminal investigation into the poisoning of Otis and Darnell King. The judge looked at Otis. She looked at the old man sitting quietly with his cane. Mr. King, she said softly, you have the court's apologies. Your restraining order against Tiffany King is granted. She is to come nowhere near you, your property, or the hospital room of your son. Otis stood up. He nodded slowly. Thank you, Your Honor. As the judge banged the gavel to end the session, 2 police officers who had been waiting in the back of the room walked forward. They didn't put handcuffs on Tiffany yet, but they stood on either side of her. Mrs. King, we need you to come with us for questioning, one of the officers said. Tiffany looked around the room. She looked for an ally. She looked for a camera. She looked for anyone who would believe her act. But there was no one. The audience saw the truth. Her lawyer was packing his briefcase, refusing to make eye contact. She looked at Otis. "You planned this," she hissed at him as she walked past. "You set me up." "I didn't have to set you up, Tiffany," Otis said, his voice low and steady. "I just had to wait for the autopsy of my own kidney. You put the poison in there. You signed your name on my organs." She was led out of the courtroom, her cream-colored dress looking like a shroud. I watched her go. I didn't feel joy. I didn't feel happiness. I just felt the heavy, solid weight of the truth. Bull clapped a hand on my shoulder. "It is over, Otis. The DA will pick it up from here. She is facing 20 years. I looked at Dr. Hart, who was still on the witness stand, looking relieved. "It isn't over, Bull," I said. "Why?" Bull asked. "She is finished." "Because Darnell is still dying," I said. "And he is the only one who can testify that he saw her making the tea. Without him, she might wiggle out. She might blame it on a supplier. She might blame it on accident." I walked toward the door. "I need him to live long enough to tell the truth," I said. I walked out of the courtroom into the bright hallway. The reporters were waiting. Flash bulbs popped. Microphones were shoved in my face. "Mr. King! Mr. King! Is it true? Did she poison you?" I didn't stop. I pushed through the crowd, my cane clicking on the marble floor. I wasn't a celebrity. I was a father who had one last job to do. I had to go watch my son die, and I had to hope that before he took his last breath, he would find the courage to be a man for the first time in his life. Blue lights flashed against the limestone facade of the mansion I built with my own hands. It looked like a disco for the damned. I sat in the back of the Lincoln watching through the tinted window as the Chicago Police Department tore my legacy apart room by room. They were not being gentle. They knew there was a poisoner inside, or at least the evidence of one. I saw officers carrying out boxes of documents. I saw forensic techs in blue booties walking over the marble floors that Tiffany used to yell at me for stepping on with my work boots. Jerome sat in the front seat eating a sandwich, shaking his head. "They are really tearing the place up, boss," he said. "They are looking for a needle in a haystack," I said. "But they are going to find it. Because Tiffany is arrogant. She thinks she is smarter than everyone. She wouldn't throw the weapon away. She would keep it, like a trophy." I was right. Inside the house, Detective Miller was leading the search. He went straight to the master suite. Tiffany was sitting on the edge of the bed, still in the clothes she had worn to court, watching them with a look of pure disdain. She wasn't crying anymore. The act was over. Now she was just angry. "You are wasting your time," she spat at Miller. "I don't have arsenic. That old man is setting me up. He probably planted it here while I was at the courthouse." Miller ignored her. He opened the walk-in closet. It was the size of a small apartment filled with designer clothes, shoes that had never touched a sidewalk, and bags that cost more than a car. He went to the vanity table. It was a shrine to her vanity. Mirrors, lights, and hundreds of jars of creams and serums. He put on a pair of latex gloves. He started opening the jars. Anti-aging cream, night serum, eye lift gel. Then he found it. It wasn't a chemical bottle. It wasn't marked poison. It was an old, high-end perfume bottle. The glass was dark blue. It looked like something you would buy in Paris. But the label had been peeled off. Miller unscrewed the cap. He didn't smell perfume. He smelled the faint metallic tang of death. He carefully poured a drop onto a test strip. The strip turned black instantly. "Liquid herbicide," Miller said, holding the bottle up to the light. "Concentrated. The kind you need a license to buy. The kind they use to kill weeds that are choking out the flowers." He turned to Tiffany. "You put it in a perfume bottle," he said, "right next to your face cream. You looked at this bottle every morning while you made yourself beautiful, and then you went downstairs and put a few drops in your father-in-law's tea." Tiffany stood up. Her face was a mask of stone. "It is for the garden," she said. "I have a weed problem." "You have a husband problem," Miller corrected her, "and you decided to prune him." He nodded to the uniformed officers. "Cuff her." They grabbed her arms. This time there was no gentle escort. They pulled her hands behind her back and snapped the steel cuffs on tight. "You are making a mistake," she screamed as they dragged her out of the bedroom. "I want my lawyer. I want to call the mayor." They marched her down the grand staircase. I watched from the car as they brought her out the front door. The press was waiting at the gate, but the police shoved her into the back of a squad car before she could give another performance. She looked out the window, her eyes locked with mine. Even through the tint, she knew I was there. She didn't look scared. She looked venomous. She mouthed something at me. I couldn't hear it, but I knew what it was. "You haven't won yet." I tapped Jerome on the shoulder. "Take me to the hospital," I said. "The police have the weapon. Now they need the motive. And the only person who can give them that is the man she tried to kill." When I walked into Darnell's room, the atmosphere had changed. The fear was gone, replaced by a cold, hard silence. Darnell was still yellow, still hooked up to the machines, but he was sitting up. The TV was on. The news was playing the footage of Tiffany being shoved into the police car. He watched his wife being arrested. He watched the woman who had promised to love him in sickness and in health being hauled away for trying to speed up the sickness part. I stood by the door. "You saw it?" I asked. Darnell nodded slowly. He didn't look at me. He kept his eyes on the screen. "She had poison in her makeup kit," he whispered. "In her makeup kit, Pop. She kissed me every morning with that face, knowing she had the bottle right there. She wanted the money, Darnell," I said. "She wanted it fast. And she knew as long as I was alive and as long as you were sick but stable, she couldn't liquidate the assets. She needed a funeral." Darnell turned to look at me. His eyes were bloodshot and full of a pain that had nothing to do with his kidneys. "I loved her, Pop. I gave her everything. I signed whatever she put in front of me. I turned against you for her, and she played you," I said. "She played us both." Just then, Detective Miller walked in. He looked exhausted. He had come straight from the raid. "Mr. King," he said to Darnell, "I need to ask you some questions. We found the arsenic, but your wife is claiming she used it for gardening. We need to know if you ever saw her handling it. We need to know if you ever saw her putting anything in your food." Darnell looked at the detective. Then he looked at me. For a moment I saw the old Darnell, the weak one, the one who would lie to protect his comfort, the one who would cover for her because he was afraid of being alone. But then he looked back at the TV. They were showing a clip of Tiffany from an old gala laughing, holding a glass of champagne. Something inside my son broke, or maybe for the first time it healed. "She didn't garden," Darnell said. His voice was raspy but clear. "She hated dirt. She wouldn't touch a weed if her life depended on it." He took a deep breath, and the tubes in his nose rattled. "She made the tea, Detective. Every Sunday. She insisted on brewing it herself. She said it was a special blend for my health. She stood over me and watched me drink it." Miller took out his notebook. "Is that all?" Miller asked. "No," Darnell said, "and this is the part that killed the last shred of pity I had for him." "That is not all," Darnell continued. "You want to know why she did it. You think it was just for the house." He laughed, a wheezing, painful sound. "The house was peanuts, Detective. The house was just the tip of the iceberg. Tiffany wasn't just killing us for real estate. She was killing us to cover her tracks." "Cover her tracks?" for what Miller asked, stepping closer. Darnell looked at the ceiling. "Tax fraud," he said. "Massive tax fraud." I stepped forward. "What are you talking about, Darnell?" "She was using your company, Pop," Darnell said, looking at me with shame. "The subsidiary you put me in charge of. King Logistics. She was cooking the books for 3 years. She was creating fake vendors, paying out millions to shell companies that she owned, and then writing it off as business losses." I felt my knees go weak. I grabbed the doorframe. King Logistics was the company I had built to handle shipping for the construction materials. I had given it to Darnell to run because I wanted him to feel important. I wanted him to have something of his own. "She stole from the company I asked. She didn't just steal," Darnell said. "She laundered. She was washing money for some very bad people in Eastern Europe. She was using our trucks to move things that weren't on the manifest. And she was terrified that if I died of natural causes, or if you died and the forensic accountants came in to audit the estate, they would find it." He looked at Miller. "She needed us dead and cremated fast, Detective. She needed to dissolve the company and flee the country before the IRS audit next month. That's why she pushed for the surgery. That's why she poisoned us. It was a cleanup operation." Miller was writing furiously. "Do you have proof of this?" Miller asked. Darnell reached under his pillow. He pulled out a small silver key. "Safe deposit box 405 at Chase Bank on State Street," Darnell said. "I kept a backup. I kept the real ledgers. I don't know why. Maybe I knew deep down that she would turn on me one day." Miller took the key. He put it in an evidence bag. "You realize, Mr. King, that by admitting this you are implicating yourself in federal crimes?" You are admitting to being an accomplice to money laundering and fraud." "I know," Darnell whispered. "I signed the checks, detective. I knew what she was doing. I looked the other way because I liked the cars, I liked the suits, I liked being the big shot." He looked at me. Tears streamed down his yellow cheeks. "I sold my soul for a lifestyle pop, and look where it got me. I'm dying in a bed poisoned by the woman I bought it all for." Miller nodded. "I'll send a team to the bank," he said. "Thank you for your cooperation." Miller left the room. I stood there looking at my son. I should have been angry. He had let his wife turn my company into a criminal enterprise. He had let her use my trucks for smuggling, but I wasn't angry. I was just tired. "You finally told the truth," I said. "It's too late, isn't it?" Darnell asked. "It's never too late for the truth," I said. "But the consequences, those are right on time." Just then, my phone buzzed. It was Bull Johnson. "Otis, are you sitting down?" Bull asked. "I'm standing," I said. "What is it?" "We just got a flag from the forensic accountant reviewing Tiffany's frozen accounts," Bull said. "Did you find the money?" I asked. "We found the accounts," Bull said. "But Otis, they are empty." What I shouted. How I froze them. "She was one step ahead, Otis." Bull sounded impressed in a sick way. 2 hours before the police raided her house, right before she was arrested, she executed a wire transfer. She didn't use the bank accounts. She used a crypto wallet that we didn't know about. "How much?" I asked. "Everything," Bull said. "She liquidated the shell companies Darnell just told you about. She drained the hidden funds. $3 million, Otis. It was sent to a decentralized exchange. It's gone. It's in the wind." I hung up the phone. I looked at Darnell. "She moved the money," I said. Darnell closed his eyes. "Of course she did," he whispered. "She always said she needed a retirement plan. She was sitting in a jail cell right now facing 20 years for attempted murder. But she was sitting there knowing that when she got out, or if she could bribe her way out on bail, she had $3 million waiting for her in the cloud. She thinks she won a consolation prize," I said, gripping my cane. "She thinks she can buy her way out of hell," Darnell said. I walked to the window and looked out at the city lights. "She forgot one thing," I said. What Darnell asked. "She forgot that I know people who can find things in the cloud," I said. "And she forgot that stealing from me is bad, but stealing from the Eastern European mobsters she was laundering money for, that is a death sentence." I turned back to Darnell. "Rest, son. You did the right thing today. You gave us the map. Now I am going to go hunt down the treasure, and I am going to make sure that when Tiffany reaches for that pot of gold, all she finds is handcuffs." I walked out of the room. The police had the poison. Darnell had given them the fraud, but the money was the final battle, and I wasn't going to let her keep a single dime of the empire she tried to burn down. The Cook County Jail does not smell like the courthouse. The courthouse smells like bureaucracy and floor wax. The jail smells like unwashed bodies, industrial bleach, and fear. It is a smell that sticks to your clothes and crawls into your pores. I had been here before visiting guys from the neighborhood who got caught up in the life, but I never thought I would be walking these gray corridors to visit a member of my own family. I sat in the visitor's booth staring at the thick scratched plexiglass that separated the free world from the caged one. The phone on the wall hung limp on its cord. I didn't pick it up yet. I just waited. My hands rested on the head of my cane, steady and calm. The pain in my side was a dull throb, a reminder of the sacrifice I had made, but today it felt less like a wound and more like a badge of honor. The heavy steel door on the other side buzzed and clanked open. A female guard stepped out, followed by a prisoner in a bright orange jumpsuit. It was Tiffany. She looked small. That was the first thing I noticed. Without the 6-inch heels, without the designer shoulder pads, without the hair extensions and the contouring makeup, she was just a small, pale woman with dark circles under her eyes. Her hair was pulled back in a messy knot. Her skin, usually glowing with expensive serums, looked gray and patchy under the harsh fluorescent lights. But her eyes were the same. They still held that sharp, venomous glint. She didn't walk with her head down like the other prisoners. She walked with a swagger, a defiance that said she still believed she was better than everyone in the room. She sat down on the metal stool. She looked at me through the glass. Then she smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. It was the smile of a wolf that had been cornered but thinks it still has one last bite left. She picked up the phone. I picked up mine. "Hello, Otis," she said. Her voice was tinny through the receiver. "You look terrible." That suit is getting a little loose on you. Are you losing weight? Maybe the poison is still working. I looked at her, keeping my face blank. I am still standing, Tiffany, I said, which is more than I can say for you. How is the accommodation? I hear the mattresses are a little thinner than the ones at the Ritz. She laughed. It was a jagged, manic sound that made the guard behind her look up. You think this is the end? She asked, leaning closer to the glass. You think because I'm wearing orange, you won. You are so naive, Otis. This is just a timeout. My lawyers will have me out on bail in 48 hours. The judge was emotional. The evidence is circumstantial. Once the dust settles, I will be back at the house and you will be back on the street. She paused, her smile widening into something cruel. And even if I stay here for a while, she whispered, fogging up the glass, I still win. Do you know why? Why, I asked. Because your son is dying, she hissed. I felt a cold spike in my chest, but I didn't flinch. I know about the rejection, Otis, she continued, her eyes dancing with malice. I know his kidneys are shutting down. I know he is lying in that hospital bed right now, drowning in his own fluids. And guess what? You played your last card. You gave him your kidney. You don't have another one to give. You can't save him this time. She started to laugh again, a low, bubbling chuckle. You cut off the water, you froze the money you sent the police. You destroyed everything to save him, and he is going to die anyway. And you are going to be the lonely old man at the funeral knowing that you failed. You failed his mother, and now you failed him. I might be in jail, Otis, but you are in hell. I watched her laugh. I watched her enjoy the pain she thought she was inflicting. She was feeding on it. She thought she had found the one thing that could break me. I waited until she stopped laughing. I waited until she wiped a tear of mirth from her eye. Are you done? I asked quietly. She shrugged. I'm just telling the truth, old man. It hurts, doesn't it? I leaned forward. I brought my face close to the glass, so close that if it weren't there, our noses would have touched. I didn't come here to talk about Darnell, I said. Darnell is in God's hands now, and if he dies knowing the truth. He dies knowing who loved him and who poisoned him. That is a peace you will never have. Tiffany rolled her eyes. Save the sermon. Why are you here then to gloat, to see me in orange take a picture? It lasts longer. I came to talk about your retirement plan, I said. Tiffany froze. Her eyes flickered. For a split second, the arrogance vanished. I don't know what you are talking about, she said too quickly. The Cayman Islands, I said. The color drained from her face so fast it looked like someone had pulled a plug. Grand Cayman. I continued, my voice steady and relentless. Account number 7429 at the First Caribbean International Bank, the one held under the shell company Blue Horizon Ventures. She gripped the phone so hard her knuckles turned white. She looked around the room as if checking for spies. You are bluffing, she whispered. You can't know that. That is encrypted. That is offshore. $3,400,000, I said. You transferred it 2 hours before the arrest. You thought you were slick. You thought that while the police were kicking down the front door, you were sneaking the loot out the back door of the internet. She didn't say anything. Her mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. You were going to use that money to pay for the Dream Team defense, weren't you? I asked. You were going to hire the best lawyers in Chicago. You were going to bribe witnesses. You were going to buy your freedom. And then when it was all over, you were going to fly to a beach somewhere and drink mojitos while my son rotted in the ground. She slammed her hand against the glass. It is my money, she screamed. I earned it. I made those deals. You stole it. I corrected her. You stole it from my company. You stole it from the IRS. And you stole it from the mobsters you were washing it for. I sat back, adjusting my tie. But here is the bad news, Tiffany. I have friends. You know that. You used to make fun of my friends. You called them thugs. You called them low-life construction workers. But you forgot that before I built houses, I built relationships. I smiled at her. A cold, hard smile. I have a friend named Marcus. We grew up together on 63rd Street. Marcus took a different path. He didn't go into construction. He went into international banking security. He works for a very interesting division of Interpol now. He specializes in asset recovery for fraud cases. Tiffany started to shake. Real shaking. Not the fake trembling she did in court. What did you do? She breathed. I called Marcus, I said. I gave him the account number. I gave him the digital trace Darnell provided. And do you know what Marcus did? No, she whimpered. No, you can't. That is outside U.S. jurisdiction. Fraud is universal. Tiffany. Marcus made a phone call to the banking authorities in the Caymans this morning. He flagged the account as proceeds of organized crime and international money laundering. I leaned in again. It is frozen. Tiffany. Every cent. She dropped the phone. It swung on its metal cord, hitting the wall with a dull thud. She stared at me, her eyes wide with horror. She scrambled to pick it up, fumbling with the receiver. You are lying, she shrieked into the phone. You are lying. Go ahead, I said calmly. Call your lawyer. Ask him to check the retainer fee. Ask him why the transfer bounced this morning. Ask him why he isn't here right now. She looked at the door, waiting for her high-priced attorney to walk in and save her. But nobody was coming. You have no money, Tiffany, I said. You have no house. You have no husband. And now you have no defense. You are going to go into that courtroom with a public defender who has 50 other cases on his desk. And you are going to face a district attorney who has a toxicology report, a confession from your husband, and a video of you abusing an old man. I stood up. My knee popped, but I didn't care. You said I won the battle but lost the war, I asked her. I looked down at her, seeing her small, shivering form in that orange jumpsuit. I didn't just win the war, Tiffany. I burned the battlefield. I salted the earth. You are going to die in prison. And the only thing you will have to keep you company is the memory of the money you almost got away with. She started to cry. Not fake tears. Ugly, desperate tears. She slammed her fists against the glass. Otis, please, she begged. Undo it. I can help you. I know where the rest of the money is. I can give you half. Please don't leave me here with nothing. I hung up the phone. I watched her scream silently behind the glass. I watched her mouth the words, I'm sorry, over and over again. But I didn't hear them. I didn't want to hear them. I turned my back on her. I walked toward the heavy steel door. I tapped my cane on the floor with each step. Click, click, click. The guard opened the door for me. She looked at Tiffany, who was now sliding down the wall, sobbing into her hands. Then she looked at me with respect. You okay, Mr. King? The guard asked. I am fine, officer, I said. I just took out the trash. I walked out into the corridor. The air in the jail still smelled like bleach and misery, but as I walked toward the exit, I could smell the fresh air coming from outside. It smelled like rain. It smelled like cleaning. I had one more stop to make. The hospital. Tiffany was right about one thing. Darnell was dying, but she was wrong about me. I wasn't going to be the lonely old man at the funeral. I was going to be the father who stayed until the very end. And if Darnell died, he would die free. Free of her poison, free of her lies, and free of the debt she had tried to drown us both in. I pushed open the exit doors and stepped out into the Chicago rain. It was cold, but it felt good. It felt like baptism. I hailed a cab. Northwestern Hospital, I said. And hurry, my son is waiting. Chào bạn, tôi là Trân Dung Dan ông già Dan. Tôi đã hoàn thành phần 14 của câu chuyện. Đây là đoạn cao trào về mặt đạo đức nơi Otis phải đưa ra quyết định khó khăn nhất của một người cha, từ chối dùng tiền để cứu đứa con trai đã mục nát về nhân cách. Nội dung bên dưới được viết bằng tiếng Anh văn phong từ sự trầm lặng và dứt khoát được định dạng chuẩn để bạn đưa vào AI đọc voice không tiêu đề, không ký tự, đặc biệt dòng chảy cảm xúc liền mạch. The machine next to Darnell's bed was making a sound like a dying radiator. Hiss, click, hiss, click. It was the only thing keeping his blood moving because his own body had gone on strike. I sat in the chair by the window, watching the rain streak against the glass. The city of Chicago looked gray and tired, just like me. It had been 24 hours since I watched Tiffany dragged away in handcuffs. 24 hours since I froze the Cayman accounts. You would think I would feel victorious. You would think I would be celebrating the destruction of my enemies. But there is no victory in watching your own bloodline wither away in a hospital bed. Darnell was awake, but barely. The toxins were building up in his brain again despite the dialysis. He was drifting in and out of a fog, muttering names of people I didn't know, maybe gambling buddies, maybe debts he still owed. Every now and then his eyes would focus and he would look at me, not with love, not with remorse, but with a hunger. He looked at me the way a starving man looks at a locked refrigerator. Pop, he wheezed. His voice was like dry leaves scraping on concrete. I turned from the window. I rested my hands on my cane. "I am here, Darnell." He tried to push himself up, but his arms were too weak. He collapsed back onto the pillows, panting. The doctor came in. He whispered, "Dr. Hart." She said, "The numbers are bad." She said, "The dialysis isn't working fast enough." "My heart is getting weak." I nodded. "I know." I spoke to her. Darnell licked his cracked lips. She said, "I need another transplant, Pop. A rescue transplant." She said, "This one, the one you gave me, is dead tissue now. It has to come out before it rots inside me, and I need a new one immediately." He paused, waiting for me to jump up, waiting for me to volunteer again, waiting for me to offer my other kidney or my lung or my heart. He was so used to me being his spare parts department. I stayed seated. I stayed silent. Pop Darnell said, his voice rising in panic, "I can't go on the list. The UNOS list." She said the wait time in Illinois is 5 to 7 years. "I don't have 5 years. I don't have 5 weeks. "That is the reality, son," I said. "There are thousands of people waiting. Good people. People who didn't poison their donors." Darnell shook his head violently. "Screw the list," he hissed. "The list is for poor people. The list is for people who don't have the King name." He reached out a shaking hand toward me. "You have the money, Pop. I know you do. Tiffany told me about the secret accounts. She told me about the buildings you own. You are a millionaire 10 times over." So I asked, "So buy me one," he begged. "There are places." I looked it up online before they took my phone. China, India, the Philippines. There are brokers, Pop. For $200,000, we can fly a private medical jet. We can get a kidney tomorrow. A fresh one. A young one. I looked at him. I looked at the desperation twisting his yellow face. He wasn't asking for a miracle. He was asking for a transaction. He wanted me to go into the black market and buy human flesh to replace the gift he had squandered. "You want me to buy an organ?" I asked slowly. "Yes," he cried. "What is 200,000 to you? You just froze 3 million of Tiffany's money. Use that. Use her money to save me. It's poetic justice, right?" He tried to smile. He thought he was being clever. "Just write the check." "Pop, get me on a plane. I will be good this time. I promise. I won't drink. I will take the meds. Just buy it. Please, I don't want to die." I stood up. The pain in my side flared a sharp reminder of the last time I tried to save him. I walked over to the bed. I towered over him. I looked down into his eyes and I saw the reflection of the boy I used to carry on my shoulders. But that boy was gone, eaten by the man who lay before me. "Darnell," I said. My voice was low, vibrating with a finality that silenced the room. "Do you know where those black market kidneys come from?" He blinked. "Who cares? I care," I roared. My shout echoed off the sterile walls. Darnell flinched, shrinking back into the sheets. "Those kidneys come from desperate people," I said, leaning in. "They come from fathers in debt. They come from mothers trying to feed their children. They come from people like me, Darnell, people who are exploited by the rich." I tapped my chest. "I gave you a kidney freely. It was a gift of love. And you poisoned it. You treated it like garbage. And now you want me to use my money, the money I made from sweating in the sun for 40 years to go and harvest a piece of another human being. You want me to exploit some poor man in a village halfway across the world just so you can have a second chance to drink vodka and play poker." Darnell started to cry. Ugly, selfish tears. "But I am your son," he screamed. "Doesn't that matter? Doesn't blood matter?" "Blood matters," I said, "but character matters more." I pulled my checkbook out of my pocket. Darnell's eyes lit up. He thought I was breaking. He thought I was writing the check. I opened it. I ripped out a blank check. I held it up. Then I tore it in half. And then in half again. I let the pieces flutter down onto his blanket. "My money can buy buildings, Darnell. It can buy justice. It can even buy a new wing for this hospital. But my money cannot buy a life for a traitor." "Pop, no," he whimpered. "You want a kidney?" I asked. "Then you do what every other person in this hospital does. You get in line." I pointed to the door. "You fill out the paperwork. You talk to the social worker. You prove to the doctors that you are sober. You prove that you are worthy. And you wait. You wait in the dark. You wait while you are scared. You wait like the single mother down the hall who has been waiting for 3 years. You wait like the teacher on the second floor who has been waiting for 5. That is a death sentence. Darnell sobbed. You are killing me. No, I said. I am finally treating you like a man. I gripped my cane, feeling the wood bite into my palm. For 40 years, I skipped the line for you, Darnell. When you got in trouble at school, I fixed it. When you got in debt with the bookie, I paid it. When you needed a house, I built it. When you needed a kidney, I cut myself open. I always put you in the front of the line. I stepped back from the bed, and look what it created. A monster who thinks he can buy his way out of consequences. A monster who thinks he is entitled to the flesh of others. I am done cutting the line for you, son. Otis, please, don't leave me. I am not leaving you, I said. I will come visit you. I will sit in this chair. I will bring you magazines. I will hold your hand when you are scared. But I will not buy you a kidney. I looked at the dialysis machine one last time. You have to earn this one, Darnell. You have to fight for it. And if you don't survive the wait, then you die with the dignity of knowing that for once in your life, you didn't cheat. I turned around. Darnell was wailing now, a sound of pure, terrified grief. It broke my heart to hear it. Every instinct in my body screamed at me to fix it, to pull out the phone, to make the call, to wire the money. That is what a father does. He fixes things. But I knew that if I fixed this, I would damn him forever. If I bought him a kidney now, he would never learn. He would just be a vampire with a new lease on life. I walked to the door. I stopped and looked back. Welcome to the real world. Darnell, I whispered. It is cold. It is hard. And it is fair. I walked out into the hallway. Dr. Hart was standing there. She had heard everything. She looked at me with tears in her eyes. She didn't judge me. She nodded. She knew. She knew that sometimes the only way to save a soul is to let the body face the fire. I walked to the elevator. My side hurt. My heart hurt. But my conscience was clean. I had given him life twice. I could not give him a third time. Now it was up to God and the waiting list. The hallway of the 4th floor felt like a tunnel that never ended. I had just walked away from my son. I had just told him that he had to wait in line like everyone else, knowing full well that he probably wouldn't survive the wait. My chest felt heavy, like I had inhaled wet concrete. I wasn't regretting my decision, but the weight of it was crushing. I was a father who had just signed his son's death warrant with a clear conscience. I reached the elevator and pressed the down button. I just wanted to go home. I wanted to go to the empty, quiet house that I had reclaimed from the bank. I wanted to sit in my chair and stare at the wall and try to figure out how 40 years of love had turned into this tragedy. Mr. King. The voice was soft but urgent. I turned around. It was Dr. Hart. She wasn't wearing her white coat anymore. She was holding a manila folder tight against her chest, and her face was pale. She looked like she had been crying, or maybe she hadn't slept in 3 days. Maybe both. Dr. Hart, I said, leaning on my cane. I already said goodbye. I can't go back in there. I know, she said. I heard you. And you were right, Otis. You were absolutely right. She looked up and down the hallway, checking for nurses, checking for police. But there is something else, she whispered. Something I couldn't say while Darnell was conscious. Something I couldn't say while Tiffany was free. She nodded toward a door at the end of the hall marked Chief of Surgery, Private. Please, Otis, you need to hear this. I followed her. My side was throbbing. Every step was a reminder of the surgery, a reminder of the piece of me that was currently rotting inside my son's body. Or so I thought. We walked into her office. She locked the door behind us. She closed the blinds. The room was dark, lit only by a small desk lamp. She gestured for me to sit in a leather chair. She sat behind her desk and placed the folder in front of her. She didn't open it immediately. She just stared at it, taking a deep breath. Otis, she began, her voice trembling slightly. You are a good man. You are the strongest man I have ever met. You took a bullet for a son who was holding the gun. I looked at my hands. I gave him a kidney, Alana. That isn't taking a bullet. That is just being a father. She looked me right in the eye. No, Otis, you didn't. I frowned. The room seemed to tilt a little. What do you mean, I asked. I have the scar. I have the pain. I woke up -1 organ. I saw the chart. You have the scar? Yes, she said. You had a nephrectomy. We removed your left kidney." She leaned forward, her eyes intense. "But Darnell does not have it." The silence in the room was absolute. I could hear the hum of the refrigerator in the corner. I could hear my own heartbeat thumping in my ears. "I don't understand," I said slowly. "If he doesn't have it, where is it? Did it fail immediately? Did you throw it away?" Dr. Hart opened the folder. She pulled out a series of photos. They were gruesome. Pictures of internal organs, pictures of a liver and a kidney that looked black and twisted. "These were taken during the surgery," she said. "When we opened Darnell up to put your kidney in, we found something the scans missed. The arsenic poisoning. It didn't just shut down his kidneys, Otis. It was aggressive. It triggered a rapid metastatic reaction in his liver cells." She pointed to the black spots in the photo. "Cancer, Otis, stage 4, caused by the very poison he was taking to trick you." I stared at the photos. The irony washed over me like ice water. Darnell had poisoned himself to get a kidney, and the poison had given him cancer that made the transplant impossible. "We couldn't give him the kidney," Dr. Hart explained. "It is against all medical ethics and protocols to transplant a healthy organ into a body that is riddled with metastatic cancer. It would have been a waste of a viable organ. It would have killed him on the table." "So," I whispered, "you closed him up." "We closed him up." She nodded. "Then why is he alive?" I asked, my voice rising. "It has been 10 days. He has been walking. He has been talking." He looked better until the rejection started. Dr. Hart sighed. "He isn't rejecting your kidney, Otis. He is crashing because the high-dose steroids and experimental adrenaline boosters I put him on are wearing off." She looked down at her hands. "I kept him alive with chemistry, Otis. I told him the surgery was a success. I told him the pain he felt was post-op recovery. I pumped him full of the strongest stimulants we have. It gave him a false burst of energy. It made him feel like he was healed." I sat back in the chair. My mind was reeling. "You lied to him," I said. "You lied to everyone." "I had to," she said fiercely. "Why?" I asked. "Why didn't you just tell us the truth on day 1? She stood up and walked around the desk. She sat on the edge of it right in front of me. "Because of you, Otis. Me, if I had come out of that operating room and said the transplant was canceled because of cancer, Tiffany would have known the game was up," she said. "But more importantly, I needed to get your kidney out." I touched my side. "My kidney, Otis. Look at the toxicology report again," she said gently. "The arsenic levels in your blood were lethal, but the concentration in your left kidney, it was critical. That organ wasn't just filtering poison, it was hoarding it. It was becoming necrotic. If I had left it inside you for another week, it would have ruptured. You would have died of sepsis." She took my hand. "I didn't remove your kidney to save Darnell, Otis. I removed it to save you." I stared at her. Tears welled up in my eyes. I had walked around for 10 days thinking I was a victim of theft. I thought they had stolen my body part, but they hadn't. This woman, this doctor, had used the surgery as a cover to perform a life-saving operation on me. "And you kept it a secret," I whispered. To buy time, she finished. "If Tiffany knew Darnell was dying of cancer and that the transplant failed, she would have fled immediately. Or worse, she would have tried to finish you off with a pillow to get the inheritance before Darnell died. I needed her to feel safe. I needed her to think she won. I needed her to stay in that house long enough for you to recover, for the hair samples to grow out, and for you to find the evidence to put her away." I looked at the photos of Darnell's insides again. The black rot, the physical manifestation of his greed. "So he never had a chance," I said. "Even if I bought him a kidney on the black market today, he would be dead in a month," she said. "The cancer is everywhere. The arsenic burned him down from the inside out." I closed the folder. "He killed himself," I said. "He did," she agreed. "He poisoned the well, and then he drank from it." I sat there for a long time. The anger I had felt toward Darnell evaporated. The resentment I felt about wasting my kidney vanished. I hadn't wasted anything. I had survived. I was walking out of this hospital with one kidney, yes, but it was the healthy one. The poisoned one was gone. The cancer was gone. And Darnell, he wasn't rejecting me. He wasn't rejecting my love. He was simply facing the biological consequence of his own evil. "Does he know?" I asked. "No," she said. "I haven't told him. I thought maybe he should die thinking he had a chance. Thinking he was just unlucky with a rejection." "No," I said, standing up. I grabbed my cane. I felt a surge of energy I hadn't felt in years. The fog was gone. The mystery was solved. He needs to know Alana. She looked worried. Otis, it might kill him. The shock. He is dying anyway, I said. But he is dying thinking I abandoned him. He is dying thinking his father's kidney wasn't good enough. He is dying thinking he is a victim of biology. I walked to the door. He needs to know that I didn't fail him. He needs to know that his father's blood was too good for him. He needs to know that he is empty. Otis, I looked back at her. You saved my life, Doc. Thank you. You are the daughter I never had. I opened the door. But I have to go finish this. I have to go tell my son that the only thing inside him is the poison he bought with his wife. I walked back down the hallway. The tunnel didn't look endless anymore. It looked like a path to the final truth. I wasn't walking to a deathbed. I was walking to a mirror. Darnell was going to look into it one last time, and I was going to make sure he saw exactly what was looking back. I wasn't a donor. I wasn't a victim. I was a survivor. And as I put my hand on the handle of room 402, I realized something that made me stand taller than I had in 40 years. They tried to take my heart. They tried to take my house. They tried to take my life. But they missed. And now I was going to make sure they knew exactly why they missed. Because you cannot kill a man who has already buried the part of him that was weak. I pushed the door open. Darnell was staring at the ceiling, tears running down his face. He looked at me, hoping I had come back with a check. I didn't come back with money, son, I said, closing the door behind me. I came back with the biopsy results. And for the first time in his life, Darnell looked truly terrified, not of death, but of the truth I was holding in my hands. The sound of a gavel hitting a block of wood is not loud, but it has a finality to it that echoes louder than any gunshot. I sat in the back row of the courtroom watching the woman who had tried to erase me stand before the bench. Tiffany was not wearing designer clothes today. She was not wearing the cream-colored dress she had used to play the victim. She was wearing county orange. Her hair, usually dyed and blown out to perfection, was showing dark roots and was pulled back in a severe, messy bun. The handcuffs around her wrists clinked softly as she trembled. The district attorney had not been lenient. They had the toxicology reports. They had the receipts for the herbicide. They had the wire transfer records to the Cayman Islands. And most damning of all, they had the testimony of her dying husband. Tiffany had tried to plead not guilty, claiming insanity, claiming coercion, but the jury didn't buy it for a second. They saw what I saw. A predator. Judge Moore looked down from the bench. She took off her glasses and rubbed the bridge of her nose. She looked tired of seeing the worst in people, but she was ready to deliver the remedy. Tiffany King. The judge said, her voice cutting through the silent courtroom. For the counts of attempted murder in the first degree, elder abuse, wire fraud, and money laundering, this court sentences you to 20 years in the Illinois Department of Corrections. You will not be eligible for parole for at least 17 years. Tiffany didn't scream. She didn't fight. She just collapsed. It was as if the strings holding up a puppet had been cut. Her knees hit the floor and she let out a low animal sound of despair. The bailiffs picked her up by her armpits. She looked back over her shoulder, scanning the room, looking for someone to save her. Her eyes locked on mine. I didn't smile. I didn't wave. I just nodded. It was the nod a foreman gives when a dangerous structure has finally been demolished safely. The job was done. The hazard was removed. I watched them drag her through the side door. The heavy steel door slammed shut, swallowing her into the system. She was gone. The woman who thought she was too smart for consequences, too pretty for prison, and too rich for rules was now just a number in a cage. I stood up and walked out of the courthouse. The sun was shining, but I didn't feel warm. I had one more stop to make, one more goodbye to say. And this one was going to be much harder than the one I just witnessed. The hospital room was quiet. The machines that had been keeping Darnell alive for the past 2 weeks were still humming, but the rhythm had changed. It was slower now, more labored. The doctors told me days ago that it was a matter of time. The cancer accelerated by the arsenic and the stress had consumed his liver. His body, weak from the failed transplant and the years of abuse, had simply stopped fighting. I walked to the side of the bed. Darnell was unconscious. He had been in a coma for 2 days. He looked so small. The bloating had gone down, leaving him looking skeletal. His skin was gray, stretched tight over his cheekbones. He didn't look like the man who had yelled at me. He didn't look like the gambler. He looked like my son again. He looked like the boy I used to take fishing on the pier before the world, and his own choices twisted him. There was no one else in the room. No friends. No drinking buddies. No wife. Just me. The father he tried to kill. The father who was the only one left standing. I pulled up the chair, the same metal chair I had sat in for 14 nights. I reached out and took his hand. It was cold. His fingers were limp. I remembered how strong his grip used to be when he was a baby, holding onto my pinky finger like it was the only anchor in the world. I squeezed his hand, hoping for a squeeze back, but there was nothing. I didn't cry. I think I had run out of tears a long time ago. I felt a deep, hollow sadness, a canyon in my chest where my heart used to be, but my eyes were dry. I wasn't angry anymore. Anger is for the living. For the dying, there is only truth. You made it hard, son, I whispered to the silence. You made it so hard to love you. The heart monitor slowed down. Beep, beep, beep. I watched the lines on the screen. I watched the last reserves of energy fading from his body. I wondered if he could hear me. I wondered if in that dark space between life and death he finally understood. Tiffany is gone. Darnell, I said softly. She can't hurt us anymore. You don't have to be afraid of her. You don't have to lie for her. You are free. His chest rose and fell one last time. It was a shallow, shuddering breath, a rattle in his throat, and then stillness. The line on the monitor went flat. The machine started to wail, a high-pitched alarm signaling the end. I didn't call the nurse immediately. I sat there for a moment with my dead son. I looked at his face. The tension was gone. The fear was gone. He looked peaceful. I stood up. I leaned over and kissed his forehead. It was cold, but it was still my flesh and blood. Sleep now, son. I whispered, my voice breaking just a little. In the next life, be a decent person. Be the man I knew you could be. I let go of his hand. I turned off the alarm. I walked to the door and told the nurse that it was over. Then I walked out of the hospital and didn't look back. I had carried him as far as I could. The rest of the journey he had to walk alone. 3 days later, I stood in the foyer of the mansion on Lakeshore Drive. It was empty. The furniture was gone. The art was gone. The echoes of Tiffany's screaming and Darnell's parties had faded into the walls. It was just a house again, a pile of bricks and wood and glass. I had listed it the day after Darnell died. I didn't want to make a profit. I wanted to perform an exorcism. I wanted to purge the greed from the foundation. The realtor, a nice woman named Sarah, who knew the whole story, walked in with the buyers. They were a young couple, nervous, looking around with wide eyes. They knew the history. Everyone in Chicago knew the history. Mr. King, the young man said, shaking my hand, we want you to know we are going to change the energy here. We are going to fill this house with kids and noise and love. That is good, I said. A house needs honesty to stand. Without it, the roof always caves in eventually. We signed the papers on the kitchen island. The same island where Tiffany used to mix the poison into the tea. I watched my signature hit the paper. Otis King. It was steady. It was strong. The check was for $4.5 million. It was a fortune. It was enough to retire to an island. It was enough to buy a fleet of cars. But I didn't want the money. That money had blood on it. That money was the reason my son was in a grave and my daughter-in-law was in a cage. I couldn't spend a dime of it on myself. I drove straight to the bank. I sat down with the branch manager, the same man who had helped me freeze the Cayman accounts. I want to open a new trust, I said, sliding the check across the desk. What should we call it, Mr. King? He asked. The Lucille King Foundation, I said. And the purpose of the trust. I looked out the window at the busy street. I thought about Lucille. I thought about the dialysis clinics in the poor neighborhoods, the ones with broken machines and long waiting lists. I thought about the people who didn't have a father to give them a kidney or the money to buy better care. It is for kidney patients, I said, specifically for those who can't afford the treatment. I want this money to pay for dialysis. I want it to pay for transportation to the hospital. I want it to pay for the meds that keep them alive while they wait on the list. The manager typed into his computer. That is a very generous legacy, Mr. King. It isn't generosity, I said. It is repayment. I walked out of the bank feeling lighter than air. The house was gone. The money was gone. The burden was gone. I was 72 years old. I lived in a small apartment above Jerome's pawn shop now. It had one bedroom, a small kitchen, and a window that looked out over the alley. It wasn't a mansion. It didn't have a swimming pool. but the water ran clear and cold from the tap. The heat worked, and when I laid my head down on the pillow at night, I slept. I slept the sleep of a man who had faced the devil in his own house and won. I slept the sleep of a father who had done his duty even when it broke his heart. I was Otis King. I was a builder, and I had finally cleared the rubble. Now I could rest. The wind off Lake Michigan is different this year. It does not feel like a knife anymore. It feels like a greeting. I am sitting on the end of the pier at Jackson Park, the same spot where I sat 12 months ago when I was a fugitive in my own city. But today I am not hiding. I am not shivering in a thin hospital jacket. I am wearing a thick wool coat, a new hat, and I am holding a fishing rod that isn't shaking because my hands are steady as rocks. 73 years old. That is what the calendar says. But I feel younger than I did at 60. I have one kidney working inside me, doing the job of two filtering my blood, keeping me clean. Dr. Hart says my numbers are perfect. She says I am a medical marvel. I tell her I am just a man who finally got rid of the toxicity in his life, and I wasn't talking about the arsenic. I look to my left. Bull Johnson is snoring in his folding chair, his hat pulled down over his eyes. He hasn't caught a fish in 3 hours, but he doesn't care. He comes for the silence. He comes because he is the only one who remembers the old days, the days before the mansions and the betrayal. I look to my right. Alana Hart is reading a medical journal, her line drifting lazily in the water. She doesn't call me Mr. King anymore. She calls me Otis. She comes over for dinner every Sunday, not to poison me, but to eat soul food and talk about the foundation. She is the daughter Darnell should have married. She is the family I chose. And then there is Grace. She is walking down the pier now, carrying a thermos and a basket of sandwiches. She is 70 years old, a retired school teacher who volunteers at the Lucille King Foundation. She has silver hair that she wears loose and a smile that makes the Chicago winter feel like spring. She doesn't want my money. She doesn't care about my buildings. She likes me because I know how to listen. She likes me because I make her laugh. Otis, she says, putting a hand on my shoulder. You are going to freeze out here. I am made of concrete. Grace, I tell her, smiling up at her. Cold doesn't bother me. She pours me coffee. Steam rises into the air. Her hand lingers on my shoulder for a second longer than necessary. It is a gentle touch, a respectful touch. It is the kind of touch I haven't felt in 20 years. It isn't a fire, it is a hearth. It is warm and safe and honest. People ask me sometimes, usually in a whisper at the grocery store or church, if I miss him. They ask if I miss Darnell. They expect me to cry. They expect me to be the grieving father broken by the tragedy. I tell them the truth. I tell them I miss the boy who used to run to the door when I came home from work. I miss the child who believed I could fix anything. But I do not miss the man who died in that hospital bed. I realized something sitting out here on the water. I didn't lose Darnell the day he died. I lost him the day he decided that my life was less valuable than his lifestyle. I lost him the day he looked at his mother's sacrifice and saw it as a permission slip to be weak. The man who died was a stranger who wore my son's face and used my son's voice to tell lies. I grieved for him a long time ago. Now I am just grateful. I am grateful for the silence in my head. I am grateful that when I wake up, I don't have to worry about who is plotting against me. I don't have to check the taste of my tea. I don't have to look over my shoulder. Bull wakes up with a snort, nearly dropping his rod. Did I catch anything, he asks, looking around wildly. You caught a nap, Bull, I say. Go back to sleep. Alana laughs. It is a bright, happy sound. The foundation is opening a new dialysis center next month on the west side. We are naming it after Lucille. We are going to help 500 people a year get to their appointments. We are going to pay for their meds. We are going to make sure no one has to choose between paying rent and staying alive. That is my legacy now. Not the buildings, not the empire, but the lives we are saving. Darnell wanted to consume. He wanted to take. I am spending the rest of my days doing the opposite. I am giving. Grace sits down next to me. She takes a sandwich out of the basket. You know, Otis, she says softly. There is a jazz concert at the park next week. I was wondering if you wanted to go. I look at her. I look at the kindness in her eyes. I am an old man with one kidney and a tragic history. But looking at her, I feel something stirring in my chest. It is hope. I would like that, Grace, I say. I would like that very much. I reel in my line. The hook is empty, but that is okay. I didn't come here to catch fish. I came here to remind myself that the water keeps flowing, the ice melts, the seasons change, and no matter how dark the winter gets, the sun always comes back up. I am Otis King. I am 73 years old, and for the first time in my life, I am completely, beautifully free. Many believe that blood is the strongest bond, forcing us to forgive the unforgivable. I learned the hard way that this is a dangerous lie. Being a parent means giving life, but it does not require sacrificing your dignity to sustain a parasitic soul. My son chose greed over gratitude, and in doing so, he severed the lifeline that connected us long before the surgery. True family is not defined by DNA, but by mutual respect and care. Sometimes the most heroic act of love is not to save someone, but to let them face the consequences of their own choices. Many believe that shared blood is an unbreakable contract forcing us to forgive the unforgivable. I learned the hard way that this is a dangerous lie. Parenthood is about giving life, but it does not require sacrificing your dignity to sustain a soul that has chosen greed over gratitude. My son severed the lifeline between us long before the surgery. True family is defined not by DNA, but by mutual respect and loyalty. Sometimes the most heroic act of love is not to enable a monster, but to let them face the consequences of their own choices. If you enjoyed this story and believe in justice, please hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. And tell me in the comments, would you have given the second kidney? I read every single comment. See you in the next story.